Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and I am so glad you could join us for today's deep dive. We're going to be exploring a technique that can seriously boost your English speaking skills. It's called shadowing, and I've got just the expert to help us break it all down. Sarah, welcome to the lab.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I'm excited to dive into this with you and all our listeners.
So shadowing, it sounds kind of mysterious, maybe even a little intimidating, but from what I've heard, it's all about mimicking native English speakers.
Yeah.
To improve your pronunciation, your intonation, even your fluency. Is that right?
That's the core idea, yeah. Just imagine listening to someone speaking English and then trying to repeat what they're saying almost. Simultaneously, like their shadow. You're not just focusing on the words themselves, but also their tone, their rhythm, how they stress certain syllables. It's about capturing those nuances of how they speak.
Okay, so it's like a vocal workout, where you're training your mouth to move in the same way as a native speaker. I'm starting to get the picture, but I think what our listeners are really curious about is why this works. Why is simply mimicking someone so effective for learning a language?
That's a great question. And the answer lies in how our brains process language. When you shadow, you're forced to listen very intently. You're dissecting sounds, intonation patterns, the natural pauses and flow of speech. Your brain goes into overdrive trying to make sense of it all, and that active engagement is what supercharges your learning.
So it's like your brain is working out too, not just your mouth. But let's get practical for a second. Say our listener is completely new to shadowing. Where do they even begin?
Well, the beauty of shadowing is you don't need any fancy equipment. It starts with choosing some audio to work with, and this is crucial. It needs to be something you actually enjoy listening to, because you'll be spending a lot of time with it.
That makes sense. You wouldn't want to be stuck shadowing a boring lecture if you're secretly a true crime podcast fanatic.
Exactly. If you're a beginner, start with something clear and easy to follow. Maybe a podcast designed for English learners or some YouTube channels with subtitles. As you get more comfortable, you can move on to things like TED Talks or even audiobooks.
So start simple and then level up as you go. Got it. But choosing the audio is just the first step, right? What comes next?
Right. Once you've got your material, you need to set the scene. Find a quiet place where you won't be interrupted. Grab some headphones if you want to really focus in. If the audio comes with a transcript, have that handy as well. Then, just like an athlete wouldn't jump into a race without warming up. It's good to do some vocal warm-ups before you start shadowing.
I'm picturing tongue twisters and funny faces in the mirror.
Absolutely anything to get those muscles moving and ready to go. Once you're all warmed up, it's time for the first listen. This time through, don't worry about shadowing just yet. Just listen to the audio all the way through, focusing on understanding the content and paying attention to the speaker's pronunciation and rhythm.
So it's all about absorbing the sounds, getting familiar with the speaker's style, and then the real shadowing begins.
You got it, now hit play again. But this time, as soon as the speaker starts talking, start repeating after them. The key here is not to try and speak at the exact same time. Instead, repeat immediately after them like an echo. This is called lagged shadowing, and it gives you that tiny bit of space to process what you're hearing. And try to mimic it accurately.
Lag shadowing. I like that. But let's be real, Sarah. Our listeners are human. They're going to make mistakes. I know I would. Is that okay?
Of course, shadowing isn't about being perfect. It's about progress. It's about training your ear and your mouth to work together. So don't get discouraged if you stumble. Just keep going.
Love that advice. Embrace the stumbles. Okay, so our listener is shadowing along, trying their best to keep up with the speaker. What happens next?
Here's where we bring in a secret weapon recording. Record yourself while you're shadowing, and then listen back to that recording, comparing it to the original audio. It's like holding a mirror up to your own pronunciation. Your intonation, how smoothly you're speaking.
Wow, that's a brilliant idea. It's like having a personal speech coach right there in your pocket. What specifically should our listeners be paying attention to when they listen back to their recordings?
There are a few key things to focus on. First, listen to how you're pronouncing individual sounds. Are you getting them right? Then pay attention to where you're putting the stress in words and sentences. Are you emphasizing the right syllables? And is your intonation natural? Does your voice rise and fall in the right places? Finally, listen to your overall fluency and rhythm. Are you speaking smoothly? Does it sound natural?
So it's all about analyzing those finer points of spoken English, which can be hard to catch when you're in the moment of shadowing. I can see how listening back to a recording would be incredibly helpful. So our listener has shadowed, recorded themselves, listened back, and identified some areas where they want to improve. What's the next step in this process?
It's simple practice, practice, practice. Repetition is key with shadowing. Go back and listen to the same audio clip multiple times. each time focusing on getting a little closer to the native speaker's delivery. It's like refining a skill. Each time you practice, you smooth out the rough edges and get a bit closer to mastery.
So consistency is key, right? Make shadowing a regular part of your language learning routine. But I have to ask, wouldn't it get a bit boring listening to the same audio over and over again? How do you keep things fresh and engaging?
That's a great question, Mike, and it's where those tips about choosing material you enjoy come into play. If you're genuinely interested in what you're listening to, the repetition becomes less about drudgery and more about deepening your understanding and appreciation for the nuances of the language. And to add even more variety and challenge, you can start experimenting with some advanced shadowing techniques.
Advanced techniques. Okay, now you've got my attention. Tell me more about these now.
So remember how we talked about shadowing being like a dance between your ears and your mouth? Well, let's get the rest of your body involved. One technique I call shadowing with movement.
Shadowing with movement. That sounds interesting. How does that work?
It's precisely what it sounds like instead of sitting still while you shadow. Try walking around, maybe even using hand gestures as you speak. This helps you simulate real-life conversations, where we're rarely just standing frozen like statues.
Right, so it's like taking your shadowing practice out of the classroom and into the real world. I love that idea. What other advanced techniques do you have up your sleeve?
This next one is for those who are feeling a bit more adventurous and want to push their listening skills to the limit. It's called shadowing without transcripts.
Wow, okay, that sounds like a real challenge. No safety net of the written word to fall back on.
Exactly, you're relying solely on your ears, forcing yourself to really tune into the sounds of the language. Now, I wouldn't recommend this for beginners, but once you have a good foundation, ditching the transcript can be a powerful way to accelerate your progress.
It's like taking off the training wheels and really riding that English fluency bike on your own. I like the sense of adventure here. What else have we got?
All right, this next technique is all about expanding your horizons and embracing the beautiful diversity of English accents. We'll call it shadowing different accents.
Oh yes, the world of English accents is vast and fascinating. From the crisp British accent to the laid-back Australian vibe, there's so much to explore.
Absolutely. Each accent has its unique melody and rhythm. By shadowing different accents, you're not only training your ears to understand diverse ways of speaking, but you're also adding more tools to your pronunciation toolbox. You become a more versatile and adaptable English speaker.
It's like spicing up your English-speaking palette with different flavors from around the world. I can already picture our listeners confidently navigating conversations with people from all over the globe. Okay, Sarah, what's the final advanced technique in your arsenal?
This last one is all about bringing your English speaking to life. We'll call it shadowing with emotion.
Intriguing. It sounds like we're about to tap into some acting skills here.
You could say that it's about going beyond simply mimicking words and trying to embody the speaker's emotional state as you're shadowing. If they're excited, let your voice reflect that excitement. If they're expressing sadness or concern, let those emotions color your tone. It's all about adding authenticity and depth to your spoken English.
That's fantastic. It's like you're not just shadowing the speaker, you're embodying their entire persona. I could see how this would take your English speaking to a whole new level. Now, Sarah, I know we've been talking about all the positive aspects of shadowing, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, as with any learning technique, there are going to be some challenges along the way.
Absolutely, Mike. Even the most dedicated English learners are going to hit some bumps in the road. But the good news is that most of these challenges are completely surmountable. It's all about recognizing them, understanding why they happen, and having a few strategies up your sleeve to overcome them.
That sounds like a great plan. Let's dive into some of those common challenges and offer our listeners some practical solutions. What's the first hurdle we should tackle?
One of the most common things I hear from learners is, the audio's too fast. I can't keep up.
Oh, I've been there. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming, especially when you're first starting out. But don't worry, there are a couple of things you could do. First, try adjusting the playback speed. Most audio players let you slow things down a bit, which can make a world of difference.
Right, take advantage of that slow motion button.
Another thing to consider is the material you're choosing. If you're struggling with speed, try opting for something that's naturally slower paced. There are lots of podcasts and audiobooks specifically designed for English learners that speak at a more manageable speed.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, something that challenges you, but doesn't leave you feeling completely lost. Okay, what's another common roadblock people tend to run into?
This one often goes hand in hand with the speed issue. can't keep up. I keep losing my place.
Ah, yes, the dreaded falling behind feeling, like trying to juggle too many balls at once.
Exactly, and this can happen even with slower audio, especially if the sentences are long and complex, or if the speaker has a very fast speaking style. One thing that can help is to break things down into smaller chunks. Instead of trying to shadow a whole sentence at once, focus on shorter phrases. Pause after each one to give yourself time to repeat and process.
So it's like taking bite-sized pieces instead of trying to swallow the whole thing at once.
Right, and remember our friend lagged shadowing. That technique is especially helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed. Give yourself that extra beat after the speaker finishes to let your brain catch up and prepare your mouth for the repetition.
Lagged shadowing to the rescue. I love it. Okay, what other challenges do our listeners need to be prepared for?
Sometimes the challenge isn't so much about speed or keeping up, but about understanding the words themselves.
Ah, the vocabulary barrier. That can be really frustrating.
It can be, but don't let it derail you. If you're using material that has a transcript, take advantage of that. Pause the audio, look up the word you don't understand, and then keep going. You could even start a vocabulary notebook where you jot down new words and phrases to review later.
Turning those vocabulary hurdles into learning opportunities. I like that. What about those times when the challenge isn't external, but rather internal?
I know precisely what you mean. One of the biggest hurdles for a lot of language learners is self-consciousness. That feeling of, I sound silly, or I'm not doing this right.
Oh, the inner critic can be so loud sometimes. I definitely struggle with that myself.
It's incredibly common, and it's important to remember that making mistakes is a normal part of learning anything new, especially a language. No one expects you to sound perfect right away, so be kind to yourself, embrace those stumbles, and focus on progress over perfection.
That's such an important reminder. And if you find yourself really struggling with self-consciousness, try practicing in private at first. Find a safe space where you can experiment and make mistakes without feeling judged. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
Exactly. It's all about building that confidence muscle. And speaking of tools and resources, Mike, are there any particular platforms or materials you'd recommend for shadowing?
You know, there are so many great resources out there these days. YouTube is a fantastic place to start. You can find channels specifically geared towards English learners with clear audio and often transcripts or subtitles available.
Absolutely. And don't forget about podcasts. There are tons of podcasts designed for language learners covering a wide range of topics and accents.
Podcasts are great for on-the-go learning, and if you're looking for something more interactive, there's some really cool language learning apps that incorporate shadowing into their lessons.
It's amazing how technology has opened up so many possibilities for language learners. But at the end of the day, regardless of the specific tools or techniques you choose, the most important thing is to be patient with yourself and enjoy the process. Learning a language takes time and effort, so celebrate those small victories along the way, and don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best for you.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Sarah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the fundamentals of shadowing to some pretty advanced techniques, and even those inevitable challenges that come with the territory.
I hope our listeners feel equipped and inspired to give shadowing a try. It really is a game changer.
I agree. It's like a secret weapon for unlocking fluency and confidence in spoken English. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be shadowing you, our listeners, as you confidently navigate the world of English speaking.
That's a great goal to strive for.
Well, that's a wrap for today's deep dive into shadowing. A huge thank you to Sarah for sharing her expertise with us, and to all of you listening. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more English learning tips and tricks. Until next time, happy shadowing.
Hello and welcome back to the English Podcast Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're diving deep with Sarah into something I think we all deal with, learning from mistakes.
Great to be here, Mike. I think this deep dive will have some real light bulb moments for everyone listening.
Let's be honest, mistakes happen, right? To everyone.
Yeah, they're just part of being human.
Like forgetting to send an email or even bigger things, we all mess up sometimes.
And the thing is, we don't have to let them define us. We can use them to help us grow.
I like the mistakes as fuel, because we usually connect mistakes with failure.
That's what we need to change. Mistakes and failures aren't the same. A mistake is just something you did or chose that didn't work out.
Doesn't mean we're failures though, right?
Right, and mistakes can actually be good for us in some surprising ways.
Now this is where it gets interesting. So what are some of those benefits, Sarah?
Well, think of it this way. Every mistake is a chance to learn to get more knowledge, even new skills.
Like they say, experience is the best teacher, even if it's for messing up.
Yeah, the more mistakes we make, the more experience we get. Of course, we don't want to keep making the same ones. but each one has a lesson.
It's like a loop. You make a mistake, figure out what went wrong, learn, and do it differently next time.
Exactly. And that learning cycle helps us get better in every part of life.
You know, this reminds me of something I read about how important it is to see mistakes as learning experiences.
Oh, tell me more.
If we see our mistakes as huge failures, we avoid risks later because we get scared.
That fear of making mistakes can really hold you back, huh?
But if we can change our view and see them as chances to grow, it changes everything.
It's having a growth mindset.
And that mindset can lead to amazing things.
Oh, absolutely. When we're not afraid to mess up, we try new things, step outside our comfort zone, and we can achieve more.
It's good to remember that even really successful people have said how important it is to learn from mistakes. Walt Disney said, "The way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it." And Oprah Winfrey said, "Learn from every mistake because every experience encounter, and particularly your mistakes, are there to teach you and force you into being more of who you are."
Those are great examples, Mike. They clearly see the value in embracing mistakes.
I think Elbert Hubbard said it best when he said, "The greatest mistake you can make in life is to be continually fearing you will make one."
Yeah, that fear stops us from doing so much.
It keeps us from taking chances, putting ourselves out there, reaching our potential.
Talking about learning experiences, did you hear about that HBO intern who accidentally sent a test email to tons of subscribers?
Oh, yeah. That was all over the news.
And the reaction was so interesting, not what you'd expect.
People weren't mad at the intern for making such a big mistake.
No, there was a ton of empathy and support. People were sharing their own work mess-ups with the hashtag #DearIntern.
Wow, that's a perfect example of how our views on mistakes are changing.
It really is. It showed that people understood they were even laughing about it. It's a good reminder that we all make mistakes, especially when we're starting out.
So it's not about being defined by our mistakes. It's about owning them, learning, and moving on. Which leads to the big question, how do we learn from them? Admitting them is only the first step.
You're right. We need a process to figure out what went wrong and find those lessons.
So we don't just ignore it and pretend it never happened.
Exactly. We go deep, asking ourselves things like, what was I trying to do? What went wrong? When did things start going off track? And why did it go wrong?
Those are some really helpful questions to think about a mistake.
And by answering honestly, we start to see the root cause and where we need to change our approach.
It's like being a detective solving the mystery of the mistake.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the more we investigate, the better the lessons we find.
I think sometimes getting other people's thoughts can be helpful too.
Absolutely. A fresh set of eyes can see things we miss.
A boss, a coworker, a mentor, even a friend. Getting constructive feedback helps us see things from different angles.
And that gives us even better insights.
Okay, so we've admitted the mistake, analyzed it, and maybe got some feedback. Now what's next in our learning journey?
Now we find the lesson. That's where the real value is.
Because every mistake has some hidden insight in it.
Right. Exactly. And our job is to find it.
How do we do that?
By asking ourselves, what did I learn from this? Maybe it's a new skill, understanding something better, or learning about our strengths and weaknesses.
Sometimes a mistake shows us a problem we didn't even know we had.
Right. And by seeing our blind spots, we can fix them and not make the same mistakes again.
Turning stumbles into stepping stones.
I love that. It's so true. Each mistake helps us grow and improve.
So once we've found those lessons, what do we do with them? How do we actually learn from them and not keep repeating them?
Great question. That brings us to making a plan to use what we've learned.
So it's not enough to just think about it. We need action.
Exactly. We have to put those lessons into practice. Maybe that's making new habits, changing our strategies, or getting some training to fill in gaps.
Like, if the mistake shows we need to get better at managing time, we could take a course or try new ways to get organized.
Exactly. It's about turning lessons into actions that help us avoid making the same mistake again.
And our plan needs to be specific.
Right. Yes. The more specific and actionable our plan is, the more likely we are to actually do it.
It's like we're making a roadmap for how we want to grow.
And remember, learning from mistakes isn't a one-time thing. It's a journey.
It's about always getting better throughout our lives.
And another important part of that is teaching others what we've learned.
So we're sharing our hard-earned knowledge with everyone.
Exactly. By sharing what we went through and what we figured out, we can help others avoid the same problems and learn from our experiences.
Paying it forward.
And when we teach something, it helps us understand it better too.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered admitting the mistake, analyzing it, getting feedback, finding the lessons, making a plan to use them, and teaching others. Is there anything else we need to do to make sure we're really learning from our mistakes?
There are a couple more things, Mike. One is to regularly think about our progress.
So taking a look at how far we've come and celebrating those wins.
Exactly. It's important to appreciate our successes and see the positive changes we've made.
And that can be really motivating.
Yeah,
It helps us keep going.
for sure. It reinforces the idea that mistakes are chances to grow, not setbacks.
I think it's also super important to remember to be kind to ourselves through this whole process.
That's so important, Mike. We need to be kind to ourselves.
Making mistakes can be tough on the ego.
It's easy to be hard on ourselves when we mess up, but it's so important to remember that we're all human and we're all going to make mistakes.
It's about learning to forgive ourselves, embrace our imperfections, and keep going with a positive attitude.
And that brings us to the last piece, embracing vulnerability.
We need to acknowledge that making mistakes can make us feel vulnerable.
Yes, and instead of trying to hide that vulnerability, we need to embrace it as a natural part of growth.
It takes courage to admit we're wrong, to ask for help, and to put ourselves out there.
It does. And by embracing that vulnerability, we open ourselves up to even more learning and growth.
And we create a more supportive environment for those around us.
Absolutely. When we're open about our mistakes, it gives others permission to do the same. And it helps create a culture of learning and constant improvement.
And that's what it's all about.
It is. Learning from mistakes is a journey that can lead to incredible personal and professional growth.
It's a journey filled with challenges and victories, and it's definitely one worth taking.
And the key is to approach it with a growth mindset, a willingness to learn, and a lot of self-compassion.
That's a great way to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive.
It's been great exploring this with you, Mike.
Likewise, Sarah. And to our listeners, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into learning from mistakes, where we'll explore even more strategies and mindsets that can help you turn your blunders into breakthroughs.
So as we move into this next part on learning from mistakes, I want to talk about building a learning mindset.
Okay, so what exactly does that mean?
It's about changing how we see things. Instead of seeing challenges as threats to our ego, we see them as chances to grow.
That sounds like what we were talking about before with being vulnerable.
Exactly. A learning mindset means knowing we don't have all the answers. And that's okay.
It's being curious, asking questions, being open to different ways of thinking.
Yes. And it's knowing that making mistakes is part of learning.
So we don't fear mistakes. We see them as helpful feedback.
That's it. A learning mindset helps us see setbacks as temporary and focus on what they can teach us.
I can see how this change in thinking could really impact our personal and professional lives.
It definitely does. When we go through life wanting to learn and willing to learn from everything, it opens up so many possibilities.
It lets us keep evolving, adapting, and growing.
And it gives us the power to achieve more in every part of our lives.
It's amazing to think about the potential of a learning mindset.
Here to help us on this journey of growth, I also want to talk about the importance of having mentors and support from others.
That's a great point, Sarah. Having people we can turn to for guidance and encouragement can make a huge difference.
Whether it's a mentor, a coach, a supportive friend, or a professional network, having people in our corner can help us deal with the challenges of learning and growing.
They can give us valuable insights, encouragement when we're down, and help us stay focused on our goals.
Exactly. And they can celebrate our wins with us, which keeps us motivated and keeps us going.
We all need that strong support system to help us through the good and bad times.
And it's important to remember that building a learning mindset and finding that support are ongoing things.
It takes effort and a real commitment to growth.
But it's worth it.
I agree. So to sum up this part of our deep dive, the main takeaway is mistakes are not the enemy. They are valuable teachers.
Well said, Mike.
And by embracing a learning mindset, developing strategies for analyzing those mistakes, and finding a supportive community, we can turn what we might see as blunders into real breakthroughs.
I've really enjoyed this conversation, Mike. It's been great to share these ideas with everyone listening.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into learning from mistakes. Stay tuned for part 3, where Sarah will leave you with a final thought to think about as you continue on your journey of growth and discovery. Welcome back to the English Podcast Lab for the last part of our deep dive into learning from mistakes. We've covered so much today, from why mistakes happen to seeing them as chances to grow. We've even talked about practical ways to find those valuable lessons hiding in our slip-ups. Sarah, as we wrap up, what's one last thought you want to leave our listeners with?
Mike, it's been a great conversation. I hope everyone listening feels like they can embrace their mistakes and see them as stepping stones to success. My final thought is this: how will you turn your next mistake into a chance to grow? What systems or strategies can you use to help you learn?
That's a great question for all of us to think about. It's not enough to just say, oh, I made a mistake. We need to do something about it and use what we've learned in our lives. Remember, growth doesn't happen instantly. It's a constant process of learning, adapting, and changing. Be kind to yourselves, embrace those mistakes, and keep trying to be your best selves. And if you like this deep dive, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the English Podcast Lab YouTube channel. We'll have more deep dives into interesting topics coming soon, so hit that subscribe button and stay tuned. Until next time, happy learning, everyone.
See you next time.
Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike and I'm excited to be here today for a deep dive into something really fascinating. Lifelong learning.
And I'm Sarah. I'm so glad to be here with you today to help guide us through this topic as we kind of explore why it matters and how to make it a part of your life.
Yeah, it's interesting. We spend all this time in school, right? Learning and soaking it all up. But then for a lot of us, it's like that drive to learn kind of just goes away after school. Like we've hit the finish line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's easy to fall into routines and responsibilities and forget about learning. But what's really interesting is that stepping out of those routines to learn new things can actually be a huge boost for your brain. It's like rewiring your neural pathways.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really? So tell me more about that.
Well, for instance, research from Harvard found that learning a new language can actually increase gray matter volume in the hippocampus, which is the area of the brain that's responsible for forming new memories. So you're not just learning vocabulary, you're literally changing your brain.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's kind of like working out, but instead of building muscles, you're building up your brain. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And those reserves are what help us stay sharp as we age. It's like investing in a cognitive 401k. The more you put in now, the more you'll have to use later. And it's not just about preventing memory decline either. Lifelong learning can also really boost your self-esteem and your overall well-being.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you challenge yourself and you master something new, that feeling of accomplishment can be incredibly empowering.
Absolutely. And you shouldn't underestimate the social benefits either. Imagine joining a pottery class and discovering a hidden talent. But you also connect with a community of other creative people. Lifelong learning opens doors to unexpected friendships and shared passions.
Yeah, you're totally right. Like building your own tribe of people who think like you do and who are excited about the same things that you are. And let's be honest, who doesn't love to geek out with people who totally get it?
Exactly. And on the topic of getting it, employers really value that commitment to growth. Taking courses, even if you're not going for a full degree, shows that you're adaptable and that you're eager to learn new skills. And that's a big plus in today's world.
Yeah, especially in such a fast-changing job market.
Yeah.
So think about a skill that you've always wanted to learn, but it maybe seemed a little bit intimidating, like coding or public speaking. What if we looked at breaking that skill down into smaller steps so that it could be more achievable? That's part of the power of lifelong learning. You can actually overcome those mental hurdles.
Absolutely. And those skills that might seem intimidating at first can be the key to opening up new opportunities, like a promotion, a career change, or even just feeling more confident.
But I think that's something a lot of people don't think about. Lifelong learning is not just about acquiring knowledge, it's about applying it in the real world.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be just formal education either. It can be as simple as trying out a new hobby like photography, or even just reading books and listening to podcasts to expand your knowledge.
Right? It's about being curious and asking questions and looking for new perspectives.
And the great thing is that it doesn't have to cost a lot of money or be super formal. There are so many free resources available online, like educational videos and open source learning platforms.
That's such a good point. There are so many amazing opportunities to learn just a click away. You could literally learn anything you want from anywhere in the world.
It's really incredible. And I think that accessibility is what makes this whole idea so empowering. It's about taking control of your own learning journey and choosing what excites you and making it work for you.
Okay, so we've talked about how lifelong learning is good for you. It's easy to access and it can even be fun. But how do we actually make it happen? How do we stop saying, I'm too busy, and actually make time for learning in our busy lives?
That's a great question. And I think it starts with changing our perspective. Instead of thinking of learning as something we have to do, let's start thinking of it as something we get to do.
Yeah, I love that. It's like turning it from a chore into a privilege, a chance to explore things that really make you excited.
Exactly. It's like rediscovering that wonder and excitement we all felt when we were kids learning about the world for the first time.
I love that. It's like being that kid again who's always asking why and is just excited to explore new things. It's about getting that passion for discovery back.
And when you start to think about learning like that, it becomes an adventure, not a chore.
Okay, so we've talked about changing our mindset. But what about some practical advice? What are some specific ways that we can make lifelong learning a part of our daily routines?
That's where setting goals comes in, but not those overwhelming New Year's resolution type goals. I'm talking about figuring out what you're passionate about and setting realistic, smaller learning goals.
Okay, so maybe instead of saying, I'm going to learn a new language this year, you could say, I'm going to spend 15 minutes every day practicing Spanish on Duolingo. Is that what you mean?
That's a perfect example. It's about breaking down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps that you can actually fit into your schedule, even if it's only for a few minutes each day.
This is really making sense to me. It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But in this case, it's a journey of lifelong learning that starts with one small, manageable step.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to try different ways of learning. Some people learn best in a structured classroom environment, while others prefer to learn on their own through books or online resources. The important thing is to find what works for you and make it part of your life.
So it's about finding what works best for you and not getting caught up in what you think you should be doing. It's about making it work for you, your life, and your own unique way of learning.
Absolutely. And remember, it's not just about taking in information, it's about actually using it. Look for opportunities to use your new skills in your job, your hobbies, or even in your everyday conversations. That's where the real magic happens when learning turns into action and personal growth.
This is so important. It's not about just storing up knowledge, it's about actually using it and seeing how it can make a difference in your life and in the lives of others.
And don't forget to celebrate your accomplishments along the way. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a win worth recognizing. And that positive feedback can help you stay motivated and committed to your lifelong learning journey.
I love that. Giving yourself credit for every success, no matter how big or small, it's about recognizing how far you've come.
And speaking of progress, I think it's important to remember that lifelong learning isn't about reaching a final destination. It's about the journey.
It's like we're all always a work in progress, constantly learning and growing. And that's a beautiful thing.
It really is, because it means we have the power to become the best versions of ourselves, no matter what stage of life we're in.
And it's never too late to start that journey. Whether you're 20 or 80, there's always something out there to discover something that can spark your passion and make your life better.
And that's exactly the message we want to leave our listeners with today. The power of lifelong learning is within your grasp. It's a gift you give to yourself, a gift that keeps on giving.
So take that first step. Explore what makes you curious and see where it takes you. You might be surprised by what you discover.
And remember, the Learn English Lab is here to support you every step of the way. So until next time, keep your minds open and keep learning.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Happy learning, everyone.
It's like we never actually get there. You know, there's always more to learn and more to explore and more to become.
Yeah, like you climb to the top of a mountain. And then all of a sudden, you can see all these other mountains in the distance. And you just want to climb them too.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And just like somebody who climbs mountains all the time, a lifelong learner is resilient and adaptable. You know, they learn how to deal with challenges and they embrace new things.
Yeah.
And they actually find joy in the process of growing and learning.
So it's not just about getting to the end. It's about enjoying the whole process, even the mistakes and the detours.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what keeps it interesting. It keeps us from getting stuck in a rut and keeps our minds flexible and engaged. And it makes sure that we're constantly changing and improving as people.
You know, it's funny. We often think of learning as something we do alone. But you've really pointed out how important the social aspect of learning is too.
Yeah.
You know, connecting with people and sharing ideas and inspiring each other. It's like this awesome energy comes from when people get together to learn and grow.
Definitely. And think about how that can affect your life. Not just in your career, but in your personal life too. You become a more interesting person, you're more well-rounded, you have more to talk about in conversations and more to share with the world.
And that confidence, that curiosity, it rubs off on other people. People are drawn to people who are passionate about learning and improving, so you're not just benefiting yourself, you're inspiring the people around you to do the same.
It's like starting a wave of good changes that spreads out from you to your family, your community, and even further.
I really like that idea. A ripple effect of positive changes. It's like this beautiful thing where one person's passion for learning inspires someone else. And then that person inspires someone else, and it keeps going.
And you know, something that stops people from really embracing lifelong learning is this idea that it has to be really expensive or take up a lot of time.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. People think they have to go back to school and get another degree and spend tons of money, but it doesn't have to be like that, does it?
No, not at all. Actually, some of the best learning experiences happen outside of traditional classrooms, you know?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about using all the amazing free resources online and having interesting conversations and just paying attention to the world around us.
So it's like being really curious and observant, always open to new ways of thinking and understanding things.
Exactly. And it's about taking initiative, you know, searching for information and trying new hobbies and asking questions.
Yeah.
It's about developing that thirst for knowledge and letting it lead you.
It's like giving yourself permission to always be learning, to really embrace that journey of discovering and growing.
You got it. And you know, it's never too late to start. Whether you're 20 or 80, there's always something new to discover, something that can light a fire in you and make your life better.
And that's what we really want our listeners to understand, that anyone can be a lifelong learner. It's for everyone.
It's a gift you give yourself, and it keeps on giving. It makes your life richer in so many ways.
So to everyone listening, we want to encourage you to accept that gift. Take that first step. Explore what you're curious about and see where it leads you. You never know what you might find.
And don't forget, the Learn English Lab is here to help you every step of the way. We're all about lifelong learning, and we're excited to share what we know and help you along the way.
So keep your minds open and never stop learning. And remember to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Happy learning, everyone.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we're taught that learning ends when you finish school. But that's not really true, is it? Our brains are designed to keep learning and adapting our whole lives.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like we have this amazing ability to constantly learn and change and become even better than we were before.
And the more we use that ability, the more we realize that learning isn't just about stuffing our heads with information. It's about looking at things in new ways and questioning what we think we know. And it's about becoming more well-rounded people.
It's about being curious and trying new things and finding joy in discovering new stuff.
So it's not just what we learn, it's how we learn. It's about holding on to that love of learning that we all had when we were kids.
And the cool thing is, the more you learn, the more you realize there's even more out there to learn. It's like opening one door that leads to a whole bunch of other doors, and each one is just waiting to be opened.
It's like when you get lost in a really good book and you completely forget about time because you're so caught up in the story. That's the kind of magic that happens when you really embrace learning.
I totally agree. And the best part is that this journey of learning is for everyone. It doesn't matter how old you are or where you come from or how much education you have.
That's such a good point. It's about making sure everyone has the chance to experience how powerful learning can be.
And one of the best things about being a lifelong learner is that it affects every part of your life. You become a better communicator and a more understanding listener and a more involved member of your community.
It's like those positive changes spread outward, making your relationships and your community and even the world a better place.
Exactly. And that's why we're so excited to be talking about this with you today. We want to inspire you to find joy in learning and discover how much you're capable of.
So if you're feeling stuck or like you want something more or you just want to feel that spark of curiosity again, we encourage you to just take that first step. Try something new. Sign up for a class. Pick up a book. Have a deep conversation. The possibilities are endless.
And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. It's about facing the challenges and celebrating the wins and enjoying the whole experience.
And remember, the Learn English Lab is here to support you on your journey. We're a community of lifelong learners, and we're here to share what we know and help you along the way.
So until next time, keep your minds open, keep learning, and never forget that anyone can be a lifelong learner.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Happy learning, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, your host. And today we're doing something pretty special. We're going to explore the world through somebody else's stories.
Oh, fun.
So we're going to be taking a look at the stories of Layla. And she took an incredible journey back in the 1990s. And to guide us through these adventures, we have Sarah, who is our expert on travel and storytelling.
Yeah, hi. I'm Sarah, and I'm really looking forward to this deep dive.
All right, so we're going to be looking at Layla's story, and we're going to start back in the 1990s. That's when she began her journey. And think about this for a second. No internet to speak of,
Wow.
no travel blogs,
Right.
no smartphones. Could you imagine setting off on a round-the-world trip
I don't think I could.
with only guidebooks and your wits to guide you?
It's scary.
Yeah, that's exactly what Layla did.
Wow.
And it all started with a vision, a picture she had in her mind of a red-headed backpacker trekking through Africa. And this sparked an intense wanderlust in her trainer. even though she had what many would consider a comfortable life in Geneva working for the United Nations.
Whoa. Yeah. It's amazing how one single image can be so powerful to make you change your life completely. I think it's something that many of us feel like we want to break free of our routine and explore the unknown. But Layla's story is proof that it takes courage to actually do it. What about you? Have you ever felt that pull toward adventure?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The need to get out of your comfort zone?
I think almost everybody has that wanderlust in them somewhere.
Yeah.
But what's remarkable about Layla is that she didn't just dream about it.
Yeah.
She meticulously planned for this. So we're talking an entire year of preparation.
Wow.
She even used something called the writer's market to secure writing assignments before she left.
Oh, that's smart.
So she was already going to be making money.
Wow. That's really inspiring. I mean, it really challenges all of us to think about the excuses we make for not following our dreams.
Yeah.
And back then, freelance writing wasn't as accessible as it is today. I mean, Layla had to rely on traditional networking and grit and didn't have the internet to help her.
Right, and it kind of makes you realize how much we take for granted in today's digital world. Okay, but here's the funny thing about this. Despite all that planning, Layla arrived in Cape Town, South Africa, smack dab in the middle of winter, wearing shorts and a t-shirt.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
That's a classic traveler mistake. But it goes to show that even with the best planning, there's always room for the unexpected. I guess that's part of the beauty of travel. You got to embrace the spontaneity and just roll with the punches.
That's very true. And from that slightly chilly start, Layla's African adventure really took flight. She traveled by Baz bus through a South Africa that was brimming with hope and change after Nelson Mandela's release. What an incredible time in history to experience firsthand. It makes you think about how that atmosphere of transformation and optimism must have shaped your experiences.
Yeah, I wonder that too. Being immersed in a nation that's undergoing such a huge change must have been both exhilarating and eye-opening. And it reminds us that travel isn't just about sightseeing. It's about connecting with the human story that's unfolding in a particular place and time.
Yes. And Layla didn't shy away from the complexities of that story. She took a train journey with Mozambican market traders, a really immersive experience that gave her a glimpse into their daily lives. And then she went even further off the beaten path, visiting refugee camps, navigating minefields, and witnessing the aftermath of civil war.
Yeah.
These are things that most tourists never see.
Yeah, it says a lot about her courage and her desire to connect with the world on a deeper, more authentic level. These aren't your typical postcard moments. They offer some profound insights into the human spirit and the realities of inequalities all over the world. It's a reminder that travel can be beautiful and challenging and sometimes even heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
all right. Layla's journey wasn't all about confronting these really serious realities, though. She did have some lighter moments, too. Like this one time she had a hilarious encounter with mountain gorillas. Apparently, she's not the most graceful hiker, and let's just say things got a little messy.
Oh, no.
It reminds us that even amidst challenging situations, travel can bring moments of unexpected joy and humor.
Yeah, and it's those little moments of absurdity that make the best travel stories.
Yeah.
But speaking of unexpected turns, Layla had a rather unsettling experience while she was on that same gorilla trek.
Oh.
She was abandoned in the wilderness by a guide that she describes as an evil scientist.
Oh, my.
I don't know about the evil part,
Right.
but getting left behind in a remote area like that must have been terrifying.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how reliable those guidebooks really were back then.
Right.
It's certainly a reminder to trust your instincts when you're exploring off the beaten path and be prepared for anything.
Yeah, definitely.
But Layla didn't let that experience stop her. Next, she found herself in Eritrea, a country not often visited by tourists, where she took a wild bus ride across the mountains.
That's so cool. Venturing off the well-trodden tourist trail is where the real magic of travel often is. It's in those less explored places that we can really immerse ourselves in different cultures and gain a deeper understanding of the world's diversity. Eritrea, with its unique blend of African and Middle Eastern influences, must have been an incredible experience.
Absolutely. And she observed some cultural contrasts in Massawa, where she saw Saudi men seeking a different kind of freedom.
Interesting.
And just when she thought she'd seen it all, she found herself facing an unexpected border closure due to a war in Sudan. Layla's journey was a constant reminder that the world is in constant flux, And travel is all about adapting to those changes.
Yeah, it's that adaptability, that willingness to embrace the unknown that makes Layla such an inspiration. Instead of being deterred by obstacles, she just allowed her itinerary to evolve organically.
Yeah.
It really shows that sometimes the most rewarding experiences are the ones that we don't plan for.
Yeah.
And from there, her journey continued eastward, unfolding across the vibrant landscapes of Asia. Over the next 2 years, she experienced a whirlwind of adventures, from observing sex change operations in Thailand to navigating the dangers of unexploded ordnance in Laos and witnessing breathtaking sunsets over the Mekong River.
That's incredible.
Each encounter, each place added a new layer to her understanding of the world and of herself.
And this is where we start to see how travel can be transformative, pushing us beyond our preconceived notions and broadening our perspectives.
Exactly.
Take, for example, her experience in Banda Ice during a time of intense separatist conflict. She was actually smuggled into the region.
Wow, that's crazy.
And then just a few weeks later, she found herself caught in an attempted coup in Manila, only to escape a flood in a canoe with a priest.
Oh my God.
It's almost hard to believe she managed to pack so much into a single journey.
Yeah, it speaks to her resilience and her ability to find the extraordinary in the everyday.
Yeah.
But out of all of her Asian adventures, the one that really stands out to me is her encounter with trafficked child beggars in Cambodia. It's a stark reminder that travel isn't always about beautiful landscapes and cultural immersion.
Right.
It can also confront us with the darker realities of the world, forcing us to think about complex social issues and ethical dilemmas.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
Sarah Layla's story reminds us that true exploration involves confronting both the light and the shadow sides of the human experience.
Yeah.
She didn't shy away from those difficult encounters. Instead, she used them to deepen her understanding of the world and to fuel her passion for social justice. She continued on exploring the bustling streets of Shanghai, indulging in the culinary delights of Hong Kong, and even attempted to reach Afghanistan,
Really?
although her editor wouldn't allow it.
Oh no.
It seems there's a limit even to the most adventurous spirit.
It's true. Sometimes practicality and responsibility have to win out. But that yearning to explore never left her. After more than 2 years of constant movement, Layla found herself drawn to a new and perhaps unexpected destination,
Okay.
the Baltic states, a region that she admitted to knowing very little about.
Welcome back to the Learn English Lab. We're wrapping up our deep dive into Layla's incredible journey around the world. But as we've seen, her story didn't end when she got back to Europe.
No, not at all. She may have traded her backpack for a suitcase, but the wanderlust never really went away.
Right.
She kept traveling in the years after, but she started to focus more on exploring closer to home. And she also wanted to really understand what responsible tourism was all about.
That's cool.
It shows how she was thinking about the world in new ways and wanting to connect with it in a more thoughtful and less impactful way.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that travel isn't just about cultures and environments in a way that benefits everybody.
Absolutely.
And Layla's journey, which started with that really powerful image of a red-headed backpacker in Africa, eventually led her to inspire others.
Wow.
After retiring from the United Nations, she spent her time writing and encouraging other women, especially those over 50, to travel solo and chase their dreams.
That's amazing. It's such a good illustration of how travel can empower us to break free from what society expects of us. I mean, Layla's story really challenges the idea that adventure has an age limit.
Right.
Her experiences show that the journey of self-discovery and exploration can become even more meaningful as we get older.
Yeah, and remember how carefully she planned that first 6-month trip?
Yeah.
What it turned into an almost 4-year odyssey.
Wow.
All these doors kept opening, and she bravely walked through them, embracing the unexpected and letting her path unfold naturally. It shows how freeing long-term travel can be. It's a kind of freedom that we don't often find in our busy lives.
Definitely. Long-term travel lets you really immerse yourself in things and be spontaneous in a way that's just not possible with a regular vacation.
Right.
It's a chance to really live in the moment, to experience new cultures, and just let those experiences change us.
And what advice did Layla have for people who want to go on adventures like hers?
Oh, it's really simple. She said to say yes to opportunities, embrace the unknown, and let your wanderlust be your guide.
Wow, those are powerful words. It's like she's telling us to get out of our comfort zones, face our fears, and be open to those unexpected encounters that make travel so enriching.
Exactly. Layla's story makes us think. What's one place you would travel to if you could just let go of all your worries and go?
That's a great question. And maybe one we should all try to answer. Layla's journey reminds us that it's never too late to chase our dreams and see the world. And if you're feeling inspired, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab YouTube channel for more fascinating deep dives. See you next time. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're going deep into effective study techniques. You know, the ones that actually work.
It's a jungle out there. So many techniques, so little time.
Well, we've got Sarah here, an expert in all things studying.
I'm happy to be here.
You know, we've all been there, right? Feeling swamped by information, like drinking from that fire hose. Where do we even start?
Okay, so first things first. Before you even crack open a book, think foundation. Your body, your space, they need to be ready to learn.
So, like, what, feng shui for my desk?
Well, maybe not that extreme, but yeah. Think about sleep, for example. It's not just about the night before a test, it's the days leading up to it.
You mean no more all-nighters?
Ideally, no way. Consistent good sleep, that's where it's at. That's when your brain's like, okay, let's turn these facts into long-term knowledge.
So those all-nighters, they actually backfire.
Big time. Better to rest up and let your brain do its thing.
Fascinating. And what about, like, where I study? Does that matter?
Totally. Ever notice how some places you're just more focused?
Yeah, some people are all about the library. Others, they need that coffee shop buzz.
Exactly. Switching it up, different locations, that can actually help you remember things better. It's like, ooh, a new place, better pay attention.
Wow, never thought about it like that. But I guess if you find that perfect spot, your steady haven, you stick with it, right? Especially when you're stressed.
Of course. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But a little variety doesn't hurt. Keeps things interesting.
So sleep, environment, check. Anything else? Those little things, they can make or break focus.
Music. For some people, that's a game changer.
You mean like classical music, those lo-fi beats everyone's talking about?
Yeah, that kind of stuff. Calming. Just no lyrics.
Yeah, lyrics. Total distraction. Speaking of which, the ultimate distraction. Phones.
Ugh, the worst. Digital detox, that's what you need when you're studying. Airplane mode, notifications off, or just like hide the thing.
Oh, I'm so guilty, the phone vortex. Okay, so we've got sleep, environment, distractions down. What about food? Fuel for the brain.
Ditch the sugar rush. Think sustained energy, nuts, apples, edamame, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. Those sugar crashes,
Yeah.
Brutal. Okay, so we're set, feeling focused, fueled. Now let's get active. Reading and rereading, that's not enough, right?
Nope. Passive reading, it's like watching paint dry. Active studying, that's where the magic happens. Engaging with the material, testing yourself, making connections.
Lay it on me. What are some of those active study techniques?
All right, one of my favorites. Retrieval practice. Trying to recall information without peeking at your notes.
So like flashcards, practice tests, that kind of thing.
You got it. Or there's this cool thing called the Feynman technique.
Feynman technique. Sounds fancy.
It's basically explaining a concept, like you're teaching it to someone who knows nothing. Super simple.
Well, I like that. Simplifying it like forces you to really understand it.
Exactly. And if you can teach it, you know it, you can try teaching a friend, classmate, or even just yourself out loud.
Classic, become the teacher trick. Works every time. And what about visual learners? Any tips for them?
Visuals are awesome. Color coding.
Oh yeah, love that. Makes notes way more fun to look at.
Right. Another one? Mind mapping.
Heard of that. What is it exactly?
It's like a visual map of information branching out from a central idea. Super helpful for visual learners to see those connections.
Way more engaging than a wall of text, that's for sure. Okay, so we've got active studying down. Any specific strategies for like organizing study time and making it more efficient?
Oh yeah, definitely. Ever heard of the SQ3R method?
SQ3R rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
It stands for survey, question, read, recite, review.
So a step-by-step plan.
Exactly. Let's say you're tackling a textbook chapter. First, you survey it, skim the headings, visuals, get the lay of the land. Then you start asking questions based on those headings and what you already know.
So you're already thinking about it before even reading it.
Yep. Then you read, actively looking for those answers. After each section, try to recite the main points without peeking. And finally, review the whole chapter, quiz yourself on those questions you made earlier.
That's pretty structured. Seems helpful for those who, like, get overwhelmed by tons of information.
It can definitely help. And then there's the PQ4R method. Similar idea, but it adds a reflect step after reading to really think about it.
Interesting. Both methods are about being more intentional with reading, not just passively taking it in.
That's the key. Understanding and applying, not just memorizing.
Got it. But how do I remember all this stuff long term? I study, 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 and then poof, it's gone.
The forgetting curve. That's where spaced practice comes in.
Spaced practice. Remind me how that works again.
Basically, you review material at longer and longer intervals. Learn it today, review it tomorrow, then a few days later, then a week later, and so on.
So you're like strategically fighting that forgetting curve by reviewing just before you'd forget it. That's clever.
Exactly. And there's this system called the Leitner system, which is a fancy way of doing spaced repetition with flashcards.
Sounds organized.
It is. Now, one last tip before we wrap up this part.
Hit me. Always up for a good study hack.
Did you know a quick workout or brisk walk before studying can really boost your brain power?
Really, get that blood flowing, get those brain cells fired up.
Yep. Another cool trick, study before bed. Gives your brain time to process things while you sleep.
Oh, sleep. Can't escape it. Guess it's true. Rest is productive.
100%. Sleep is like a superpower for your memory.
It really is. I'm starting to see that sleep, it's not just about feeling good. It's about, like, unlocking our full brain potential.
Right. It's amazing how much it impacts everything.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, from sleep to environment to active learning. It's a lot to take in. Any key takeaways you'd highlight for our listeners?
I think the biggest takeaway is you got to find what works for you. It's like a personal journey, you
I
know?
like that. No one-size-fits-all approach to studying, huh?
Nope. Experiment, try different things, see what helps you focus, understand, and remember.
So it's about, like, finding your study groove. What works for one person might not work for another.
Totally. And don't be afraid to change things up as you go. Different courses, different challenges, your study habits can evolve too.
Makes sense. Our study strategies should grow with us. But let's go back to some of the specifics. For someone who's just starting out, wanting to revamp their study habits, where would you recommend they begin?
I'd say first and foremost, that foundation we talked about. Sleep, getting enough consistently, it's crucial.
All right, sleep. I'm getting the message.
Huh.
But we talked about so much more than just sleep. What about the study environment? Any tips there?
Experiment. Different locations, see what helps you concentrate. You might be surprised what works best for you.
I'm all for trying new things. Mix it up.
But of course, if you have that one spot, your study haven where you're super productive, stick with it,
Right.
especially when you're under pressure.
So a balance of variety and consistency, kind of.
Exactly. Now, active studying, remember that. It's so much more effective than just passive reading.
Active versus passive, yeah. What are some ways to make our study sessions more active?
Retrieval practice, it's a game changer. Quiz yourself, use flashcards, try that Feynman technique we discussed.
Oh yeah, explaining it like you're teaching it. Simple, but powerful. Are there other ways to engage more actively with the material?
Definitely. Get creative with your notes, color coding, mind mapping, make it visual.
Visuals are definitely helpful. I'm a big fan of color coding myself, makes those notes less intimidating.
Right, and for those who like structure, the SQ3R or PQ4R methods, those are great for really diving deep into textbooks.
Yeah, those seem super thorough, helpful for staying organized and focused.
And then there's space practice, reviewing information at different intervals. It's key for beating that forgetting curve.
Spaced repetition. It's like a brain hack, outsmarting that natural tendency to forget.
Exactly. And don't forget, your physical health matters too. A quick workout or even a brisk walk before studying can help. And of course, enough sleep.
Sleep, exercise, active studying. It's like a whole body approach to learning, isn't it?
It really is. Learning involves your whole self, not just your brain.
I love that perspective. It's not just about cramming information, it's about creating a lifestyle that supports learning. So much more holistic.
Definitely.
We've talked about a lot of techniques and strategies today, but if you had to pick just one key takeaway, what would it be? What's the most important thing to remember about effective studying?
Be an active participant in your own learning. Don't just passively take in information, engage with it, question it, apply it, make it your own.
That's powerful. Taking ownership of our learning journey, not just going through the motions, but really digging in and making those connections.
Absolutely.
So listeners, we've covered a lot of ground today, from sleep to study environment, active learning, spaced repetition, even exercise, a whole toolkit of strategies.
We have.
And I think what really stands out for me is that there's no magic formula. It's about finding what works for you, experimenting, and being open to evolving your approach as you go.
Couldn't agree more.
So as we wrap up this part, I want to leave you with this. Think about your current study habits. What's working? What could be better? And what are you excited to try from what we discussed today?
It's a perfect time to reflect and maybe try something new. Even small changes can make a big difference.
It's all about those little tweaks, right?
Yeah.
Finding what works and making it even better.
Exactly. And don't get discouraged if, something doesn't click right away. It takes time.
Trial and error, that's part of the process, like learning any new skill.
Totally.
Well, we've given you a lot to think about today. Hopefully you've got some new ideas to make your study sessions more, fun even.
Yeah, studying shouldn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. It's about embracing the learning process. So tell us, what are you most excited to try? Let us know in the comments.
We want to hear all about it.
And don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the Learn English Lab. We've got more deep dives coming your way.
Until then, happy studying, everyone.
Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and boy, am I excited you're joining us for this deep dive into something I think we all love. And that's, funny stories.
Yeah, that's right. I'm Sarah, and I'm here to help you share those hilarious moments, but in English.
Yeah, we all have those stories that make us laugh, and every time we think about them. Those personal blunders, those surprising moments, those things that just cracked everyone up. And today we're going to explore how to tell those stories, especially if you're learning English.
Absolutely. It's more than just, practicing English. Sharing stories helps you connect with people, build confidence in speaking, and it's just plain fun.
Okay, so let's dive right in. We've got to pick the right story, and I'm already feeling a little stuck.
Well, think about it this way. Which story brings a smile to your face just thinking about it, Which one do you find yourself wanting to tell over and over again?
Okay, I'm starting to see what you mean. It's not just about what happened, but how you felt, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's that emotional memory that makes a story really come alive.
Okay, so let's say I have a few funny moments in mind. How do I pick the one? I've tripped up the stairs. I've accidentally called my teacher mom. I even once walked into a glass door.
Those all sound promising. But which one makes you laugh the most? Which one has the most potential for humor?
Okay, I think I've got it. Remember that time I completely messed up a presentation at work? Oh, man. It was a disaster. But looking back, it's kind of hilarious.
Now you're talking. A presentation gone wrong, that's comedy gold. So let's start building this story. How would you describe the humor? Was it awkward slapstick?
It was definitely awkward, like foot and mouth awkward. I was so nervous and I just blurted out the wrong thing at the wrong time.
I can already picture it. So we've got awkward humor. Now let's add some descriptive words. Was it cringeworthy, hilarious, mortifying?
All of the above, but definitely mortifying at the time. And speaking of words, what about those action verbs? Like, did I stumble through my notes or freeze on the spot?
Those are great. Those strong verbs are like adding sound effects to your story. And don't forget about idioms and phrases. They can add so much flavor and really capture the humor.
Oh yeah, like I wanted the earth to swallow me whole, or I could feel my face turning beet red, but I'm always a bit nervous about using idioms. I don't want to sound unnatural.
I hear ya. But with a little practice, you can use them confidently. Think of them as adding spice to your story. For instance, instead of saying, I was embarrassed, you could say, I wanted to crawl under my desk and disappear.
Okay, I see how that works. It paints a funnier picture. So we've got the story, the vivid memory, and we're building up those awesome descriptive words. What's next?
Now let's think about the structure of your story. It needs a clear beginning, middle, and end. Think of it like a mini movie with a captivating plot.
You mean like an intro, build-up, climax, and resolution?
Yes. Let's use your presentation story as an example. Your introduction sets the scene. You're nervous. It's a big presentation. Your boss is there. What else is happening?
Oh, and the projector isn't working. Classic presentation nightmare fuel.
Perfect. The tension is rising. Then comes the climax. You fumble with the slides, things go wrong, and you blurt out something completely off topic.
Okay, I'm seeing it now. The room goes silent. Everyone is staring.
Exactly. And then what happens? Does someone laugh? Does your boss say something?
Oh man, my boss just stared at me with this blank expression. It was the most awkward silence ever.
That is brilliant. So we have the build-up, the awkward blunder, and now we need the resolution. How did you get out of that situation?
Well, I stammered through an apology and somehow managed to get the projector working. The rest of the presentation was a blur.
And was everyone still cringing, or did people eventually relax?
Surprisingly, a few people started chuckling. I think they realized I was mortified and they kind of felt bad for me.
There you go. So you've got the awkward beginning, the disastrous climax, and then that resolution where the tension eases. But how do you make sure the story flows smoothly, especially in another language?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. It's one thing to have the story in my head, but it's another to actually tell it in a way that makes sense.
Well, that's what transition words can come in handy. They're like bridges that connect the different parts of your story. Words like then, suddenly, because, but they help the listener follow all.
Okay, give me an example of how that works in my presentation story.
Sure, you could say, I was so nervous, but I tried to stay calm. Then the projector died. I panicked because I didn't know what to do. See how those little words make the story flow more smoothly.
Yeah. It's like adding signposts to guide the listener along. So we've got the structure, the transitions. What about the delivery? Some people are naturally funny, But what about those of us who are a little less expressive?
That's a great point. And it brings us to the next step, practice.
Okay, so we've got our story, our vocabulary, our structure, our transitions. Now it's time to actually tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. And don't worry, you don't have to be a stand-up comedian to tell a funny story. It's more about sharing your experience with energy and enthusiasm.
So how do we practice that? Do we just stand in front of the mirror and tell ourselves the story?
That's one way to do it. It can help you get comfortable with the words and the flow. But you can also try telling the story to a friend, family member, or even a pet. The key is to practice speaking out loud.
I see your point. But talking to myself in the mirror might make me feel more awkward. And what about those nonverbal cues? Like, how much should I use my hands? What kind of facial expressions work? It can feel overwhelming.
You're absolutely right. Those things matter too. Remember how you felt during the funny event. Were you surprised, excited, mortified? Let those emotions show on your face, and don't be afraid to use your hands to emphasize certain points.
So it's almost like acting. I have to channel my inner comedian.
In a way, yes. But remember, the goal isn't to be a stand-up comedian. It's to share your story authentically. Let your personality shine through.
That makes me feel better. Okay, so practice telling the story, let my emotions show, use my hands. Anything else I should keep in mind?
Tone of voice is incredibly important. Just like your facial expressions, your tone can convey humor, surprise, or even disbelief. Play around with different tones as you practice.
Interesting. It's like adding sound effects to the story with my voice. And speaking of recording, could that be helpful?
Absolutely. Recording yourself is a fantastic way to identify areas for improvement. You can listen back and pay attention to your pacing, pronunciation, and overall delivery.
It's like having a personal speech coach right in my pocket. But what if I make mistakes? I'm still learning English, and I'm bound to mess up.
Everyone makes mistakes. It's part of the learning process. And honestly, mistakes can sometimes make the story even funnier.
That's so true. I've definitely had times when my English slip-up had everyone in stitches.
Exactly. Don't let the fear of mistakes hold you back. People appreciate authenticity. They connect with realness. So embrace those imperfections and just have fun.
This is so encouraging. I'm actually starting to get excited about sharing my presentation story. But where do I share it? It's not like I'm going to walk around telling strangers about my disastrous presentation.
Huh. Well, you could, but there are more structured ways to do it. Have you considered English conversation practice groups?
Oh yeah, those could be perfect. I've heard there are online groups too.
Absolutely. There are tons of online communities where people practice their English. It's a supportive and safe environment to share your story and get feedback.
I'm adding that to my to-do list. And hey, maybe I could even make a video for our YouTube channel. That would give me a reason to practice and really polish the story.
Now you're talking. Sharing your story on video is an awesome way to reach a wider audience and boost your confidence. Plus, it could help other English learners who are working on their story class skills.
I love that. It's all about embracing those funny moments and sharing them with the world. Okay, so we've covered so much ground today, choosing the right story, building our vocabulary, structuring our narrative, using transitions, practicing our delivery. What's the one big takeaway you want our listeners to leave with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that sharing your stories, even if your English isn't perfect, is a powerful way to connect with others and grow as a speaker. Don't be afraid to be yourself, have fun, and let your personality shine through.
I love that. It's all about embracing those funny moments and sharing them with the world. You know, all this talk about funny stories has got me thinking, I need to find my funniest story and give it a try. What about you? Do you have a go-to funny story?
Oh, I have tons, but that's a story for another day.
Fair enough. We'll have to have you back for another deep dive sometime soon. But for now, I think it's time to wrap things up. What do you say?
Sounds good to me.
All right, well, this has been so much fun exploring how to tell funny stories in English, and especially for English learners. And we've learned a lot today, from choosing the right story to, really mastering those transitions. But remember, the most important thing is to just go for it. Don't be afraid to share those hilarious moments, even if your English isn't perfect.
Yeah, I totally agree. Your story is unique and your voice is valuable, and, laughter really is a universal language.
That's a great point. And you know what? I'm feeling so much more confident about sharing my own funny story now. I might even try out some of those idioms you mentioned.
I can't wait to hear it.
And hey, maybe some of our listeners out there are feeling inspired too. So if you're ready to share your funniest story in English, we'd love to hear it. Leave a comment below, join an English conversation group, or heck, even create a video. The possibilities are endless.
Absolutely. And remember, the more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
Well said. And to our fantastic listeners, we want to say a huge thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of funny stories. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab's YouTube channel for more tips and tricks on speaking English confidently, and most importantly, having fun while doing it. We'll see you in the next episode. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're going deep on a topic I know is close to a lot of hearts out there: How to Speak English Without Fear. We've got a fantastic expert with us, Sarah, who's got a ton of great insights to help us unlock our inner confident English speaker. Sarah, ready to jump in?
Absolutely. This is such a big topic. It's wild how much fear can hold people back from really enjoying and using a language.
You put in the time, right? Hours studying grammar, you're working on vocab, maybe even ate some English tests. But then when it comes to actually speaking, right, palms are sweaty, the words just won't come out. Our listeners out there, have you ever felt that way? Well, don't worry, you're not the only one.
You know, it's so common to feel nervous or scared when speaking English. Even for people who are pretty fluent, there's actually a name for it: xenoglossophobia, fear of speaking foreign languages.
Xenoglossophobia. Wow, that's a new one for me. But it's pretty interesting, right? Just knowing there's a word for it makes it feel more real.
Yeah, and recognizing that fear is important. It can come out in all sorts of ways. Fear of messing up, fear of people judging your accent, fear of just freezing up mid-conversation.
Yeah, totally. Even avoiding speaking situations altogether. We've all been there, right? I remember one time I was in London trying to order food, and I completely blanked on the word for fork. I ended up pointing and kind of mumbling about needing a stabby thing for my pasta.
That's hilarious. It happens to all of us. It's easy to get caught up in trying to sound perfect, but fluency is about communication.
So true. That's such an important takeaway for everyone listening. It's not about sounding exactly like a native speaker. It's about being able to express yourself, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
Exactly. And that's why it can be so helpful to start small. Rather than diving into the deep end, start by practicing with someone you're comfortable with, a friend, a family member, or even just talking to yourself.
Wait, hold on. You're saying we should be talking to ourselves in English? That's not a little weird.
Not at all. It's actually a super effective way to build up fluency and confidence. You can narrate your day, practice different phrases, maybe even have full conversations with yourself. The important thing is to create a safe space to make mistakes and experiment.
I guess that makes sense. It's true, we can be our own worst critics sometimes. And there are so many great resources online now. Language exchange platforms, online communities, even apps just for speaking practice.
And the great thing about those online spaces is everyone is learning. It takes the pressure off. You can relax, make mistakes, get feedback.
It's like a judgment-free zone for English learners, which kind of brings us to the next big hurdle: fear of making mistakes.
Absolutely. It trips a lot of people up. But here's the thing, mistakes are totally normal, and actually they're crucial for learning. Every time you stumble or make a grammar mistake, think of it as a chance to figure out where you can improve.
So we should be thanking our lucky stars for those oops moments.
Put it this way, every mistake is one step closer to fluency. The more willing you are to put yourself out there and make mistakes, the faster you learn and grow.
That's actually really encouraging. Instead of fearing mistakes, we should see them as feedback.
And as you practice and get more comfortable with the language, you'll notice a shift. You start to focus less on what you can't do and more on how far you've come.
Like anything, the more you practice, the better you get. And with consistent practice, speaking English will feel more natural.
Exactly. And as you see those improvements, it creates this positive feedback loop. You get more confident, you're more willing to speak, and that leads to even more progress.
Like a self-perpetuating cycle of improvement.
Precisely. Now, one practical tip I always recommend is to slow down your pace.
Seriously. I always thought speaking fast was a sign of fluency.
That's a common misconception. Speaking too fast can actually make it harder for people to understand, especially when you're still working on pronunciation.
I've definitely done that, trying to squeeze too many words in, and it just ends up sounding like a jumbled mess.
By consciously slowing down, you give yourself more time to think, to choose your words, to pronounce them clearly.
It makes you sound more in control, too.
Communication is a two-way street. If you need something repeated, don't be afraid to ask. Could you please repeat that? Or can you explain what you mean?
Those are definitely phrases you can practice ahead of time.
Another helpful tip for slowing down and speaking clearly is to pay attention to your breathing.
Breathing, how does that tie into speaking?
Well, when we're nervous, our breathing gets shallow, which can make our voices shaky.
Oh yeah, I get that feeling.
Taking deep breaths helps calm your nerves. It helps you project your voice better.
So it's not just the words we use, it's how we use them. Breathing, pacing, pausing.
And all of those things are connected. When you feel in control of your breathing and your pace, it makes your speech more fluent and engaging.
It's like building a foundation.
As you keep practicing and refining these skills, speaking English will become less about fear and more about having fun.
I mean, that's the goal, right? To be able to connect with others, express ourselves, experience the world.
Exactly. It's about unlocking that joy of communication, realizing that speaking English can be incredibly rewarding. And that brings us to another piece of this puzzle: mindset.
Okay, mindset. So how do we shift our thinking and become more confident speakers?
It all starts with being aware of that inner voice. You know, the one, what's it saying to you when you're about to speak English?
Oh man, mine's usually a chorus of negativity, like you're gonna mess up or They're all judging you. Just stay quiet and don't embarrass yourself. Not exactly a motivational speech.
I hear you. It's normal to have those negative thoughts, but the key is to challenge them. When you feel yourself getting caught up in those doubts, stop and ask yourself, is this thought really helping? Is it true or just fear talking?
So it's about becoming our own cheerleaders. Instead of putting ourselves down, we need to pump ourselves up. You got this. Your English is amazing.
That's the spirit. It might feel silly at first, but the more you practice positive self-talk, the more you'll start to believe it.
And the more you believe in yourself, the less power those negative thoughts have.
Right. As you start to see yourself as a capable English speaker, your communication will naturally become more confident and fluent.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you can do it, you're more likely to succeed.
And the opposite is also true. If you keep telling yourself you're going to fail, you're setting yourself up for a bad experience.
So positive self-talk is key, but are there other mental tricks we can use to boost our confidence?
Visualization can be powerful. Try this before you have to speak English. Close your eyes and imagine yourself speaking confidently and fluently. Picture yourself navigating the conversation using the right words, feeling totally comfortable.
Like creating a mental movie of success.
Exactly. The more to practice this visualization, the more your brain starts to believe it's possible. It's like a mental rehearsal.
There's a theme here. Preparation is key. Practicing phrases, slowing down our speech, visualizing success. It all comes back to setting ourselves up to win.
I like that. And don't forget to celebrate those wins no matter how small. Every time you push past your comfort zone and speak English, that's an accomplishment.
So every time we order a coffee in English, we should be giving ourselves a high five.
Maybe not a full-blown celebration, but definitely acknowledge those moments and appreciate your efforts. It reinforces the positive learning cycle.
Speaking of motivation, let's talk about one of the most important things. Practice, practice, practice. It's great to learn these mindset tips, but if we don't actually use the language, we won't see results.
Absolutely. Consistent practice is essential for building fluency and confidence. The good news is there are tons of ways to incorporate speaking into your everyday life.
So even if we don't live in an English-speaking country or have regular conversations with native speakers, we can still practice.
Definitely one of my top recommendations is to find a language partner online. There are websites and apps specifically for connecting with people who want to learn your native language while you practice English.
Like a language exchange, you both benefit, you both get to practice, and who knows, you might even make a new friend.
Exactly. It's a win-win. You're learning, supporting each other, and getting that valuable speaking practice.
That's a great idea. What about those of us who are a little shy or intimidated to jump into a language exchange right away? Any ways to practice solo?
Of course, something as simple as narrating your day in English can be super helpful. As you're going about your routine, just talk to yourself about what you're doing, what you're seeing, what you're feeling.
Wait, so walk around the house talking to myself in English? My family might think I've lost it.
Well, maybe keep your voice down if you're worried about being overheard. But seriously, it's a fantastic way to get comfortable with the sounds of English and practice vocabulary and grammar in a natural way.
I like that. It's like turning everyday life into an English-speaking opportunity.
And the more you do it, the less weird it feels.
Like anything else, the key is consistency, right? It's not about cramming in hours of practice. It's about making it a habit.
Absolutely. Even just 15 minutes a day can make a huge difference over time. The key is to create that habit and stick to it.
And remember, practice doesn't have to be boring. There are so many fun and engaging ways to improve your speaking.
For sure. Think about your interests and hobbies. Are there any podcasts, YouTube channels, or online communities related to those topics in English?
That's a smart strategy. If you're passionate about something, it makes learning so much more enjoyable. You're not just studying English, you're immersing yourself in a topic you love.
Immersion is so valuable. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more natural and effortless it becomes.
I've heard watching movies and TV shows in English can help too. But I have to admit, I usually use subtitles. Is that cheating?
Not at all. Subtitles can be a great learning tool, especially when you're just starting out. They help you follow along and pick up new vocabulary.
Okay, good. I was starting to feel a little guilty about my subtitle habit. But as long as I'm actually listening and trying to understand what's being said, it's still beneficial.
Exactly. As you get better, you can challenge yourself by watching for short periods without subtitles, or maybe just using them for the trickier parts.
So we've covered a lot today. Acknowledging our fears, building a positive mindset, focusing on fluency over perfection, embracing mistakes, slowing down breathing, effectively practicing consistently. That's a lot to take in.
It is a lot, but it's a journey, not a race. Don't try to do everything at once. Just pick one or two things that speak to you and start there.
And you don't have to do it alone. There are so many resources and communities out there to help you on your journey to speaking English fluently and confidently.
So important. Learning a language has its ups and downs. Some days it feels like you're making amazing progress. Other days you might feel stuck. It's totally normal.
It's like anything worthwhile. It takes effort and dedication, but the payoff is huge.
Absolutely. And remember to celebrate every step forward, no matter how small. Every interaction, every conversation is a valuable learning experience.
I love that. Even if we make mistakes or stumble over our words, we're still learning and growing.
Exactly. And as you keep practicing and pushing yourself, you'll notice a shift. Speaking English will become less about consciously thinking about the rules and more about naturally expressing yourself.
Less about the mechanics and more about the joy of connecting and sharing.
Exactly. That's one of the most beautiful things about learning a language. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities. You can connect with people from different cultures, explore new places, even advance your career.
So to all our listeners out there, what does this all mean for you? It means that the power to overcome your fear of speaking English is right there in your hands.
It's about taking those first steps, however small they might seem. It's about believing in yourself and celebrating every win along the way.
It's about changing your mindset from fear and self-doubt to curiosity and confidence. It's about seeing English not as a barrier, but as a bridge to amazing opportunities.
And as you start this journey, remember you're not alone. There's a whole community of English learners all over the world. They're facing similar challenges and working towards the same goals.
Connect with each other, support each other, celebrate each other's successes.
Because together we can overcome those fears, find our voices, and embrace the incredible gift of communication.
One last thought for you to chew on. Imagine being able to express yourself effortlessly in English, connect with people from all walks of life, and pursue opportunities you never thought possible. What can you do today to start making that vision a reality? And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more deep dives into the world of English learning. Welcome back to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're diving into how to speak English, fluently and confidently.
I'm Sarah.
It's great to have you here, Sarah. You're a real pro when it comes to learning languages.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
So for everyone listening, you've decided to boost your English skills. That's awesome. And we're not just talking about textbook stuff, We're talking about speaking smoothly and naturally, like a pro.
Yeah, exactly.
I think one of the biggest things holding people back is, well, the fear of making mistakes. It can be scary to speak up when you're not totally sure you're getting it right.
Right.
But here's the thing. Even native English speakers, we mess up sometimes. We trip over words, mix up tenses, it happens. What matters most is getting your ideas across.
Totally. And you know what? Research actually shows we learn better when we're not afraid to slip up. Think about how kids learn language. They just dive in, trying out sounds and phrases. It's that fearlessness we want to recapture.
That's such a good point. It's about shifting our focus from being perfect to just communicating, right?
Yeah, focusing on connection.
Okay, so speaking of shifting gears, have you ever heard of this idea of thinking in English?
Absolutely. It's a total game changer for fluency. Instead of translating in your head, you start forming thoughts directly in English. It's like rewiring your brain for smoother, more spontaneous communication.
It sounds almost magical, but how do we actually do that? Like, how do we put it into practice?
Well, there are some really simple things you can try. Start by narrating your day in English, just in your mind. I'm brushing my teeth, I'm making coffee, I'm walking the dog, just creating a running commentary in English.
So instead of just going through the motions, I'm actively thinking about those actions in English.
Exactly. You can also try commenting on your thoughts and feelings in English. This song is beautiful. I'm feeling stressed today.
Interesting. So basically, I'm becoming my own English-speaking narrator.
Precisely. Another helpful thing is to describe objects you see around you. That's a red apple. This chair is comfy.
I can see how all these small things could add up.
They really do. You're creating this constant flow of English in your mind.
Now let's talk about how we sound when we speak English. Pronunciation's important, right? But I've got to say, I love accents. They add so much character to someone's voice.
Me too. Your accent is part of you. It's something to celebrate, not erase.
But are there certain sounds that are really tough for English learners?
Yeah, for sure. It depends on your native language. For example, Spanish speakers often find the th sound tricky, while Japanese speakers might struggle with the L and R sounds.
It's fascinating how our native language influences how we hear and make sounds in another language. So it's not just about learning the sounds themselves, it's like retraining the muscles in our mouths to make them.
Exactly. It's physical as much as mental.
All right, so as we're retraining those muscles and starting to think in English, how do we actually build our vocabulary and, speak in full sentences?
One really good strategy is learning phrases, not just single words. Instead of just memorizing beautiful, you might learn, that's a beautiful sunset, or you have a beautiful smile.
So it's like learning those ready-to-go chunks of language I can use in different situations.
Right. It makes your learning more efficient and helps you sound more natural.
I'm already feeling more confident. So to really sound like native speakers, what about idioms? Those quirky expressions that make the language come alive.
Idioms are awesome. They can be tricky at first, but they make you sound like you've really got a handle on English.
Yeah, like break a leg, which of course doesn't mean to actually break your leg, it means good luck. or piece of cake, which doesn't involve any cake but means something is easy.
Great examples. Idioms add humor and color to your English, but it's key to learn them in context and use them the right way.
So where do we find these idioms? I'm guessing movies, TV shows, music are all good places to start.
They are. Immersing yourself in real English content is one of the best ways to learn idioms naturally. Don't be afraid to write them down and try using them in your conversations.
Love it. It's like turning entertainment into a learning opportunity. What about podcasts, especially those made for English learners?
Podcasts are such a great resource. They cover tons of topics and styles, and many are designed specifically to help learners.
I like podcasts that have transcripts so I can read along as I listen and catch any words I miss.
That's a great tip. And some podcasts have exercises or quizzes to test your understanding, which can be really helpful.
Okay, we've got movies, TV shows, podcasts, so many great resources. But what about the ultimate immersion experience? Moving to an English-speaking country.
Living in an English-speaking environment can really speed up your learning. You're constantly surrounded by the language, forced to use it every day. You pick up nuances you might not get in a classroom.
It's like a 2047 language program, but it's also a big decision, not something everyone can do.
Totally. So what if you can't just pack up and move? Are there ways to create immersion while you're traveling?
That's a great question. What do you suggest?
You can totally create an immersive environment right where you are. It's about finding ways to engage with English in your daily life.
Like what specifically?
For example, you could find an English-speaking job or volunteer somewhere where English is the main language.
That's a great way to use your skills and get experience at the same time.
Exactly. Another idea is hosting travelers in your home through websites like Couchsurfing or Airbnb.
That's a fun way to meet people from all over and practice in a casual setting.
And it can be a great cultural exchange.
Of course, we can't forget about technology. There are tons of apps, websites, even just switching your phone settings to English can help.
Tech is definitely a helpful tool. You have dictionaries, translation apps, online platforms, but it's important to find a balance between online learning and real-life interaction.
I agree. While apps are great for vocab and grammar, it's crucial to practice speaking with actual people.
Exactly.
You know, speaking of practicing, here's a cool tip. It might sound a little strange, but trust me, use a mirror to practice speaking out loud.
A mirror. Tell me more.
I know it might feel silly, but it's actually really effective. You can see your own facial expressions, body language, even your mouth movements, which helps you see where you need to improve.
I see, like having your own personal coach.
Exactly. Plus, you can practice different situations. Giving a presentation, ordering food, having a conversation.
That's a safe space to experiment.
Right. So as we finish up this first part of our deep dive, I want to stress something super important for success in language learning: consistent effort and patience.
Couldn't agree more. It's not about overnight transformations. It's about making steady progress over time.
And celebrating those little victories along the way, right?
Absolutely. Each new word, each conversation, each time you understand a native speaker, those are all wins.
Exactly. It's all about those small wins adding up to big fluency gains.
And remember, setbacks happen. It's okay to have days where you feel stuck. Just get back on track and keep going.
Persistence is key. Ready for the next round of tips?
Absolutely. I'm excited to share more strategies.
So we've covered a lot, from thinking in English to, creating that immersive environment. Now let's get into some specific techniques to really level up those speaking skills.
I like that. Having a toolbox of techniques can be so helpful.
For sure. Let's start with something called shadowing. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, yeah. Shadowing is a great way to improve pronunciation, intonation, even your rhythm.
Sounds kind of mysterious. What is it exactly?
Basically, you're mimicking a native speaker, almost like you're their shadow. You listen to a recording and try to repeat exactly what they're saying, matching their pace and intonation.
So it's like synchronized speaking.
Exactly. It might feel a little awkward at first, but it's amazing for internalizing the sounds and rhythms of natural English.
Makes sense. So I'm not just listening, I'm actively engaging with the language, trying to reproduce it.
Yes, and that active engagement is key. It helps you develop muscle memory, for those sounds and intonation patterns.
So how do I actually do it? Just pick any recording and start repeating?
Well, it's best to start with something short and clear at a pace you can comfortably follow. A podcast, a news report, even a scene from a movie.
Got it. Something manageable.
Right. Repetition is key. Listen, pause, and then try to repeat exactly what you heard. Focus on the sounds, the intonation, even the pauses.
Breaking it down and really focusing on those details.
Yes. As you get more comfortable, you can try longer recordings, more complex ones. Even try shadowing different accents to hear the variety in English pronunciation.
Cool idea. So shadowing is for pronunciation and fluency. What about self-recording? That sounds a bit like talking to myself.
It is a bit like that, but self-recording lets you go back and really listen to yourself, which can be super insightful.
That makes sense. It's hard to judge yourself while you're actually speaking, With self-recording, I can hear how I sound to someone else.
Exactly. You could pick a topic you're interested in, maybe something you've been learning about, and just record yourself talking about it for a few minutes.
Then listen back and analyze it.
Yes. Pay attention to your pronunciation, grammar, how smoothly you speak, your overall clarity. Listen for any mistakes you keep making, any spots where you get stuck.
It's like being my own language coach.
Right. You can also use it to track your progress. It's motivating to see how much you've improved.
I love that. So we talked a bit about practicing with other English learners, but I think it deserves more attention.
Totally. It's so valuable. It creates this safe, supportive space where everyone's in the same boat.
It definitely feels less pressure than talking to a native speaker, especially when you're just starting out.
Absolutely. And you learn so much from each other, sharing tips, strategies, resources. You can even do role-playing together.
And you don't feel as bad about making mistakes because everyone's doing it.
Exactly. Plus, it's fun to connect with others going through the same thing.
So how do you find people to practice with? Are there online communities or groups?
Oh, tons. You could join a language exchange group online or in person. That way you can connect with people learning English who are also native speakers of your language.
Language exchange groups are great. You help each other, it's a win-win.
There are also English conversation clubs at libraries, community centers, sometimes even universities. Often, they're free, and they have a structure for practicing.
Great ideas. And then there are online forums and communities specifically for language learning.
Exactly. You'll find people at your level who want to practice. The key is to be proactive, put yourself out there.
Now let's talk about something that could be a game changer. Your mindset. How you think and feel about language learning can really impact your progress.
Oh, 100%. Mindset is huge. If you believe you can learn English, you're way more likely to succeed.
It's like that saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Exactly. It's not just about believing you can do it. It's about embracing the whole process, the challenges too.
Because learning a language isn't always easy. There will be times when you feel frustrated, maybe you want to give up.
That's normal. Everyone feels that way sometimes. The key is not letting those feelings stop you.
So how do we create a more positive mindset? What are some practical tips?
Well, start by setting realistic goals. Don't try to do too much too soon. Start small, then gradually make things harder as you progress.
I like that. Baby steps.
Another important one is focusing on your progress, not your mistakes.
It's easy to get hung up on those mistakes and feel discouraged.
It is, but remember, mistakes are normal. They're actually how we learn and grow.
So instead of beating myself up, I should see them as feedback, showing me where to improve.
Exactly, and don't forget to celebrate your wins, no matter how small they seem.
Yes, those little wins add up and keep you going. What are some other ways to stay positive and motivated on this journey?
Surrounding yourself with positive people can make a huge difference. Connect with other learners, share experiences, encouragement.
Having a support system is so important. What about finding resources that inspire you? Like a favorite podcast, a YouTube channel, maybe a book about language learning.
That's a great idea. Those resources can give you a boost, especially when you're feeling stuck.
And they often offer practical tips.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and creating a learning environment that feels good and motivating.
Before we move on, I want to talk about self-compassion.
Self-compassion, so vital. It's being kind to yourself, especially when you mess up or things get tough.
Because let's be real, learning a language can be hard. It's easy to be tough on yourself.
Especially when you compare yourself to others or to, some ideal of a perfect speaker.
So true. But everyone learns at their own pace.
And everyone has strengths and weaknesses. So instead of being hard on yourself, be patient.
Offer yourself the same kindness you offer a friend who is struggling.
Yes. Recognize that you're human, and this takes time, effort, and a lot of self-love.
So we've covered active learning techniques like shadowing and self-recording, the power of practicing with others, and having a positive mindset. Ready for the final stretch?
Bring it on.
Awesome. We've focused on internal strategies, but now I want to talk about external things you can do to create an environment that supports your learning.
Love that. Our environment plays a huge role in our success.
It really does. Okay, let's start simple. Surround yourself with English.
Immersion, immersion, immersion.
Exactly. Now, we talked about living in an English-speaking country, but there are tons of ways to create that immersion right where you are.
Absolutely. Find those opportunities to expose yourself to the language as much as possible.
So what are some practical ways to do that?
One of the simplest is changing the language settings on your devices to English. Your phone, computer, tablet, everything.
That's so smart.
It is. It might feel weird at first, but you adapt quickly. You're constantly seeing English, even if you're just checking email or scrolling through social media.
It's like passive learning in the background. And then there's English music and podcasts.
Music and podcasts are amazing, entertaining, and educational.
And there's something for everyone. Whether you're into pop, classical, true crime, comedy, You'll find something you enjoy in English.
And you can listen while you do other things like commute, workout, even chores.
Multitasking for language learning.
Exactly. And don't forget about movies and TV shows.
Ah, the classics. They're great for listening comprehension, and you learn different accents, slang, cultural stuff.
And with all the streaming services, there's so much to choose from.
And subtitles can be really helpful, especially when you're starting out.
Absolutely. As you get better, you can try turning them off or even use English subtitles to reinforce your reading.
Good strategy. Okay, what about reading?
Reading is so important for building vocabulary, understanding grammar, seeing different writing styles.
And it can be really relaxing.
Totally. What are some of your favorite things to read in English?
I love novels and short stories. They're immersive, you get lost in the story.
And there are so many genres to choose from. What about nonfiction?
Nonfiction is great too. You learn about new topics and build vocabulary in specific areas. History, science, business, anything you're interested in.
And English news websites and blogs are great for staying up to date and seeing different writing styles.
And for practicing reading comprehension.
Yes. So we've talked about passive immersion, but what about actually speaking English in your daily life? That's where it all comes together.
Absolutely. It's one thing to understand, but using it in real life is where the magic happens. So how do we create those opportunities?
Well, joining an English conversation group is a great way to start. We talked about them before, but they're worth mentioning again.
For sure. They're relaxed, supportive, and often led by experienced teachers who can give feedback.
Finding a language exchange partner is another good option.
Language partners are great. You help each other practice in a more personalized setting.
And it's fun. You connect with someone from a different culture.
Now let's talk about something that can be intimidating, but also really rewarding. Putting yourself in situations where you have to speak English with native speakers.
That's where the real growth happens.
It's where you test your skills, see how far you've come, and really experience the language in action.
It can be nerve-wracking, but it's also super motivating.
So what are some tips for handling those situations?
Well, remember, everyone makes mistakes. It's part of the process.
Native speakers get that you're learning, and they're usually patient.
Start small. Don't try to have a super complex conversation right away.
Like ordering food, asking for directions, making small talk with a cashier, those everyday interactions.
Exactly. And let people know you're learning.
That's a good point. Most people are happy to help. They might even slow down or use simpler language.
Right. And don't be afraid to ask if you don't understand something.
Way better to ask than to pretend you get it.
Exactly. And remember, making mistakes is okay. Don't let fear stop you from speaking.
The more you speak, the better you get. Okay, let's talk about travel, the ultimate immersion experience.
Ah, travel. There's no better way to immerse yourself in the language and culture.
You're constantly surrounded by English, so many chances to practice.
Any tips for making the most of travel for language learning?
First, choose a place you're genuinely interested in.
Makes sense. If you're excited about the place, you'll be more motivated to talk to people.
And don't be afraid to go beyond the tourist spots.
Love that. Explore those less touristy areas. You might meet locals who don't speak English as well, which can be a good challenge.
And it's a more authentic experience.
Think about doing activities that involve speaking English. A cooking class, a guided tour, maybe even volunteering.
That gives you a structured setting to practice, and you'll be with people who are also interested in learning or sharing their culture.
Exactly. And just chat with people at cafes, restaurants, shops, museums. Ask for recommendations, share stories.
Those casual conversations can be so memorable.
They really can. Before we wrap up this section, let's talk about support.
Support is crucial. Learning a language can be tough. It's so much easier with people who encourage you.
Absolutely. How do you find that support?
Connecting with other learners is huge. We've talked about this, but it's worth repeating.
Definitely. Whether it's an online forum, a conversation club, or even just chatting with other learners, those connections are valuable.
You share experiences, tips, encouragement. You learn from each other's mistakes.
And celebrate each other's wins.
What about finding a mentor or tutor?
Mentors and tutors are amazing. They give you guidance, feedback, encouragement.
And they keep you accountable and motivated. They can offer a different perspective, too.
What about support from family and friends?
They can be the best cheerleaders.
Even if they don't speak English, they can still be supportive, encouraging, and help create a good learning environment at home.
Exactly. They can help you make time for studying, be patient when you're frustrated, and celebrate your successes. Having that support makes a world of difference. So let's talk about common mistakes English learners make and, more importantly, how to avoid them.
I love that idea. Knowing those common pitfalls can help us stay on track.
For sure. So let's start with one I see all the time. Translating word for word from your native language.
Ah, the word-for-word trap. So tempting, but it can make your sentences sound really unnatural.
It can. English grammar and sentence structure are different from other languages, so those direct translations don't always work.
And it makes it harder to think in English, which we talked about earlier.
How do we avoid falling into that trap?
Focus on learning phrases and chunks of language, not just individual words.
We talked about that, but it's worth repeating. Seeing language as building blocks, not isolated words.
Yes, when you learn phrases, you're internalizing the grammar too, not just the words.
It's like learning in context, which makes it stick better.
Another tip is to pay attention to how English actually sounds. The patterns, the rhythm.
That natural flow native speakers have.
Right, listen to how they phrase things, where they emphasize words, how they connect ideas.
And don't be afraid to imitate them. Mimicry is a great learning tool.
It is. The more you hear real English, the more you'll internalize those patterns. Okay, another common mistake. Being afraid to speak.
Oh yeah, the fear of speaking. A big roadblock for a lot of learners.
It's understandable. Putting yourself out there can be scary, especially when you're not confident.
But it's like learning to ride a bike. You can't just read about it, you have to actually do it.
Exactly. And the more you speak, the easier it gets.
What are some tips for getting over that fear?
Find a safe, supportive place to practice.
Like a conversation group, or even just a friend or family member who'll listen and encourage you.
Right. Find people who won't judge you and will support you.
And remember, everyone makes mistakes. It's how we learn.
The key is not letting those mistakes stop you. See them as learning opportunities.
Don't be afraid to start small. You don't have to jump into a big, complicated conversation.
Exactly. Start with greetings, introductions, simple, everyday phrases.
And as you get more confident, you can make your conversations longer and more complex. Okay, let's talk about another mistake. Focusing too much on grammar.
The grammar trap. It's easy to get so caught up in the rules that you forget the main goal, which is communication.
So true. Grammar is important, but it shouldn't be the only thing you focus on. How do we find that balance?
Remember that fluency is about communicating effectively, even if your grammar isn't perfect.
So it's okay to make a few mistakes as long as people understand you.
Exactly. Even native speakers make grammar mistakes.
That's true. It's more about the overall flow and clarity.
And don't be afraid to experiment.
I like that. Try out new words, even if you're not totally sure if you're using them right.
The more you experiment, the more you learn. You'll start to get a feel for how the language works.
Now let's talk about using language that's too formal.
Ah, yes, the textbook English problem. It's easy to sound stiff and unnatural, especially if you've learned mainly from textbooks.
Textbooks are good for the basics, but they don't always reflect how people really talk.
So how do we avoid sounding like a textbook?
What are your thoughts?
Listen to how native speakers actually speak. Pay attention to the phrases, the tone, the flow.
Movies, TV shows, podcasts, even listening to conversations at a cafe can help.
Totally. And don't be shy about using those phrases yourself.
Another tip, practice speaking in different contexts.
Great idea. Instead of just formal stuff, try role-playing different situations.
Like ordering coffee, asking for directions, chatting about your weekend.
Those real-life situations help you develop a more natural way of speaking. And don't forget about contractions.
Ah, contractions. Those make English sound so much more natural.
Exactly. I'm going to instead of I am going to. Can't instead of cannot.
Small changes, big difference. Okay, another mistake, not asking for help when you need it.
It's easy to feel stuck or embarrassed about not knowing something.
But everyone needs help sometimes.
Absolutely. Asking for help shows that you're serious about learning and that you're not afraid to ask for guidance.
So if you're struggling with grammar, pronunciation, or just need someone to practice with, don't hesitate to ask.
Talk to a teacher, a tutor, a language exchange partner, even a friend or family member who's good at English.
There are lots of people who are happy to help.
And last but not least, be patient with yourself.
Patience is crucial.
It's a journey, not a race. Fluency takes time and effort.
It's easy to get discouraged when you don't see results right away, but remember, it's a gradual process.
There will be ups and downs, plateaus, times when you feel like you're not making progress.
Just trust the process. Be kind to yourself.
Celebrate those small wins and take breaks when you need them.
Every little bit counts. So we've talked about common mistakes like translating word for word, fear of speaking, focusing too much on grammar, using formal language, not asking for help, and impatience. And we've discussed ways to avoid those pitfalls.
Knowing those common mistakes can really make a difference.
Absolutely. Before we move on, I want to touch on one more thing, making learning fun.
Fun is so important. When we enjoy it, we're more likely to stick with it.
So true. And there are so many ways to make it fun.
What are some of your favorites?
I always try to find resources that match my interests.
I love that. If you like music, listen to English songs.
Right. If you like movies, watch English movies and TV shows. If you like reading, read English books.
It shouldn't feel like work. It should feel like a hobby.
Another tip, set yourself little challenges.
Challenges are fun, like learning 5 new words every day or watching a whole movie without subtitles.
Those challenges keep you motivated and make it more rewarding. And games.
Games are awesome for learning English.
They are. There are so many online, in app stores, even in textbooks.
And they make learning feel like playing.
Exactly. You can practice vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation without feeling like you're studying.
Try using English in creative ways in your daily life.
I love that, like writing your grocery list in English.
Exactly. Or have a little conversation with yourself in the shower in English.
Or narrate your day in your head in English.
Find those little chances to use English every day.
And don't take yourself too serious.
That's so important. Laugh at yourself, make mistakes, just enjoy it.
Learning a language should be joyful.
It should. Embrace the journey, find what you enjoy, and have fun with it.
Ready for the grand finale.
Yes. Bring on the final words of wisdom.
Okay, so we've covered a ton in this deep dive. Practice, immersion, mindset, common mistakes, making it fun. Before we finish, I want to leave you with some key takeaways.
Love those. They help solidify those important lessons.
So let's start with one we've been talking about all along, consistency.
Consistency is key. It's not about studying for hours all at once. It's about making English a regular part of your life.
Exactly. Even a few minutes a day makes a difference.
Find a routine that works for you and stick with it.
Listen to a podcast, read a few pages of a book, chat with a language partner. Those consistent efforts really pay off.
And it's okay to have off days.
Life happens. There will be times when you can't stick to your routine.
Don't beat yourself up. Just get back on track as soon as you can.
Don't lose sight of those goals. Another key takeaway, embracing mistakes.
Mistakes are our friends. They're learning opportunities.
So true. Instead of seeing them as failures, see them as stepping stones
Every mistake teaches you something new.
and brings you closer to fluency.
So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Learn from them and keep going.
Another important one, finding your voice.
Finding your voice. I love that.
It's about embracing your own personality and style as an English speaker.
You don't have to sound like a textbook, lose your accent, or be perfect.
Be yourself. Express yourself authentically and confidently.
And find the joy in it.
Let your personality shine through, have fun, be creative.
And one more. Celebrate your successes.
Celebrating is so important. It's easy to focus on the challenges and forget how far you've come.
Take time to appreciate your progress, no matter how small.
So every new word, every conversation, every time you understand a movie without subtitles, celebrate.
Pat yourself on the back, treat yourself, share your excitement with someone.
Those celebrations keep you motivated.
They do. Before we wrap up, I have one final thought.
Ooh, a final thought. Love it.
Learning English is more than just a new skill.
It's about opening up new possibilities.
Exactly. Connecting with people, exploring new ideas, expanding your world.
It makes your life richer.
So embrace the journey, be patient, and never stop learning.
Beautiful. Sarah, it's been awesome having you on the show.
Thank you. It's been great sharing these tips.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us. Remember, you've got this. Keep practicing, keep learning, and never give up on your dreams.
And if you liked this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab for more great tips on mastering English. See you next time.
Until then, happy learning. It's like having a built-in cheerleader, you know? Someone to help you stay motivated and remind you why you started this journey in the first place.
Exactly. And speaking of creating a supportive environment, let's talk about something we've touched on before, immersion. How can our listeners really immerse themselves in English, even if they're not living in an English-speaking country?
Yeah, what are some creative ways to make that happen?
Well, one super simple thing is to change the language settings on all your devices to English. Phone, computer, tablet, the whole shebang.
Ah, that's a sneaky good one. You're constantly exposed to English without even realizing it.
Exactly. You might feel a little lost at first, but you'll be surprised how quickly you adjust. Plus, you're passively absorbing new vocabulary and grammar every time you use your devices.
It's like learning on autopilot. And of course, we can't forget about all the fun stuff, movies, TV shows, music, podcasts.
Oh, absolutely. Not only are they super entertaining, but they're also a goldmine for authentic language input.
There's literally something for everyone, whether you're into action movies, romantic comedies, historical dramas, documentaries, you name it. You'll find something you enjoy in English.
And don't underestimate the power of music. Listening to English songs is such a fun way to pick up new words, work on your pronunciation, and just, vibe with the language.
Plus, you might discover some amazing new artists. Speaking of expanding your horizons, what about reading?
Reading is essential for any language learner. It's like a workout for your vocabulary, grammar, and overall understanding of how the language works.
And just like with movies and music, there's a whole universe of English literature out there to explore.
Totally. Classic novels, contemporary thrillers, biographies, self-help books, anything you can think of, you'll find it in English.
I love getting lost in a good book. And it's even better when it's helping me learn English at the same time.
And don't forget about news websites and blogs.
Ah, yeah. Those are great for staying up to date on current events and for seeing different writing styles.
Plus, I often cover a wide range of topics, so you're bound to find something that interests you.
Okay, let's shift gears for a bit. What about putting yourself in situations where you have to speak English with native speakers? That can be a little scary, but also super exciting.
It's definitely where the rubber meets the road. It's your chance to put everything you've learned into practice and see how far you've come.
It can be nerve-wracking, for sure, but also incredibly rewarding.
So any tips for approaching those situations with confidence?
Well, remember that everyone makes mistakes. Native speakers understand that you're learning, and they're usually super patient and encouraging.
It's true. Most people are happy to help.
Another tip, start small. You don't have to jump into a deep conversation right away.
Exactly. Simple things like ordering food, asking for directions, or making small talk with a cashier are great starting points.
And as you get more comfortable, you can gradually work your way up to more challenging conversations.
And don't be afraid to ask for clarification if you don't understand something. It's way better to ask than to pretend to get it and miss out on important information.
So true. Now, what about travel? For a lot of people, that's the ultimate immersion experience.
Oh, absolutely. Traveling to an English-speaking country is like diving headfirst into the language and culture.
It's a fantastic way to practice your speaking skills, interact with native speakers, and make memories that will last a lifetime.
Any tips for making the most of travel for language learning?
Well, first and foremost, choose a destination that really speaks to you, a place you're genuinely excited to explore.
Makes total sense. That passion will make you even more eager to connect with people and use your English.
And don't be afraid to go beyond those typical tourist hotspots. Venture off the beaten path a bit.
I love that. You're more likely to meet locals who might not be as fluent in English, which can be a great challenge.
And you'll get a more authentic experience of the culture.
For sure. Another tip, plan activities that involve speaking English, like taking a cooking class, joining a guided tour, or even volunteering.
Those kinds of activities provide a structured setting for practicing your speaking skills and connecting with people who share your interests.
Exactly. All right, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave our listeners with some final thoughts that I think are absolutely key for achieving fluency and confidence in English.
Ooh, I'm all ears.
First things first, remember that learning a language is a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, challenges, setbacks, but also incredible moments of growth and discovery.
It's all about the process and enjoying the ride.
Exactly. Be patient with yourself, celebrate your progress, and never, ever give up on your dreams.
And remember, making mistakes is not a failure. It's a sign that you're learning and growing.
It's all part of the process. Embrace those mistakes. See them as stepping stones to fluency.
And most importantly, find joy in the journey.
Yes. Find what inspires you, what makes you excited about English, and let that passion fuel your learning.
Beautifully said, Sarah. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today.
The pleasure was all mine, Mike. I've loved sharing these tips with your listeners.
And to all of our amazing listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into how to speak English fluently and confidently. Remember, you've got this. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself.
And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the Learn English Lab for more awesome tips and tricks to help you on your English learning journey.
We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, happy learning. Hello and welcome to the Learn English Lab. I'm Mike, and today we're going deep diving into the fascinating world of motivation. And to help us unpack all this with me today is Sarah, our expert in all things motivation.
It's great to be here, Mike, ready to kind of dig into this really complex and very often misunderstood part of human behavior.
Yeah, and it's a question that seems so simple at first glance, right? Like, why do we do what we do? I mean, we eat because we're hungry, right? We sleep because we're tired. But what about the bigger picture? The goals that we chase, the habits that we form, even the stuff that we avoid. Like, what's the driving force behind all that?
Well, that's what's so interesting about motivation is that it touches just about every aspect of our lives, doesn't it? Our personal goals, how we perform at work, our relationships, and even our overall well-being. And, while some of the answers seem pretty obvious, the deeper we go, the more complex it all becomes.
So is there a magic formula? Is there one theory out there that explains it all? Like, is there a motivation gene somewhere that we just haven't discovered yet?
I wish it were that easy. Unfortunately, human motivation is not, a one-size-fits-all concept. There's no single theory that can really capture all of its complexity. But what we do have is a whole bunch of theories, each one offering kind of a different lens through which to view this very multifaceted topic.
Okay, so let's dive into some of those theories. Maybe a good place to start is with something that we can all relate to, right? Like basic needs, things like food, water, shelter, pretty fundamental stuff.
Absolutely, and that's where Maslow's hierarchy of needs comes in. It's one of the best-known theories of motivation. Think of it like a pyramid, okay? And at the very bottom of that pyramid, we've got those essential physiological needs, the things you were just talking about, like food, water, shelter.
Okay, so we build up from there, right?
Exactly. Once those needs are met, then we move up the pyramid to, safety and security. After that, we climb to our need for belonging and love, followed by esteem. And then finally, right at the very peak of that pyramid, we have self-actualization.
So if I'm getting this right, Maslow's theory suggests that we can't really strive for those higher level needs, like finding our purpose or reaching our full potential until those lower level needs are met first.
Yeah, that's the core idea. Think about it in your own life. If you're constantly worrying about where your next meal is coming from, or if you don't feel safe, you're probably not going to be that focused on creative pursuits or personal growth, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like you said, it affects all of our daily decisions, whether we realize it or not.
Absolutely. And it gets even more interesting when you think about how this whole hierarchy, interacts with different types of motivation, specifically intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. I've heard those terms before, but I always get them mixed up. Can you break those down for us?
Of course. So intrinsic motivation is all about doing something purely because you enjoy it or find it rewarding in and of itself. It's that pure feeling of pleasure or satisfaction that you get from an activity.
So like solving a puzzle for the challenge, or, reading a good book just because you love the story.
Exactly. Those activities that make you completely lose track of time, where you're just totally absorbed in the moment, that's intrinsic motivation at play.
So I guess the extrinsic motivation is kind of the opposite of that.
Yeah, in a way it is. Extrinsic motivation is driven by those external factors, rewards or punishments. It's when you're motivated to do something because you want to gain something or avoid something negative.
So that would be like hitting the books to get a good grade on a test, or working overtime so you can earn a bonus.
Exactly. We often rely on extrinsic motivation to kind of push us towards goals that might not be so enjoyable, but are important for other reasons.
Now, here's something that I've always wondered about. Isn't intrinsic motivation, better, more sustainable and more fulfilling?
Yeah, it's true that intrinsic motivation has been linked to, greater persistence, enjoyment, and creativity. When we're intrinsically motivated, we tend to put in more effort, we burn out less, and we feel more satisfied with what we accomplish. But that doesn't mean that extrinsic motivation is bad or useless.
There's a place for both.
For sure. Extrinsic motivators can be very helpful for getting us started on things that we might not initially be excited about. They can help provide structure and accountability, and they can even help us develop new skills or habits that eventually become intrinsically rewarding.
Okay, so that makes sense. I might not be super excited about going to the gym at first, but if I stick with it, I might start to enjoy feeling stronger, or maybe I'll get that sense of accomplishment from reaching my fitness goals.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes the most effective approach is actually a combination of both intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
So this brings up something else that I've heard about. The idea that sometimes rewards can backfire and actually decrease motivation. Is there any truth to that?
You're talking about the over-justification effect, and it is a fascinating phenomenon. Basically, it says that when we reward someone for an activity that they already enjoy for its own sake, it can actually diminish their intrinsic motivation.
So it's like if I love to paint and then someone starts paying me for my paintings, it suddenly feels less like a passion and more like a job.
Yeah, that's a great example. The reward, in this case, the money, becomes the primary motivator, and the intrinsic enjoyment kind of takes a backseat.
Oh, that's a bummer. So if rewards aren't always the answer, what else can we do to boost our motivation, especially for those tasks that we just don't naturally enjoy?
That's a great question, and one that we will definitely get into. Well, it's true, not everything in life is going to feel intrinsically rewarding. We all have things we have to do, whether we like them or not.
That is the truth.
Yeah.
But so where do we go from there? How do we find that motivation?
Well, the good news is that we're not stuck with our current levels of motivation, and we don't have to rely solely on those external rewards. There are actually some really practical strategies that we can use to cultivate motivation, even for those not so fun tasks.
All right, well, lay them on me. I am ready to be motivated.
Okay, well, first off, I think it's super important to set realistic and meaningful goals. Because if a goal feels way too overwhelming or it just doesn't align with your values, you're probably not going to be that motivated to go after it, right?
So instead of saying I want to be a millionaire by next year, maybe it's more like, I'm going to try to increase my savings by like 10% this month or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And, breaking down those big goals into those smaller, more manageable steps, it can really make the whole process seem less daunting, more achievable. And that can make a huge difference in your motivation.
Yeah, it's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant?
Yeah.
One bite at a time.
Exactly. And with each step that you take, no matter how small it is, you get the sense of accomplishment, right? And that fuels your motivation to keep going.
Okay, I like this. Realistic goals, breaking it down into smaller steps. What else?
Okay, so another important piece of this is cultivating a growth mindset. And that basically means believing that our abilities and skills, they're not fixed. They can actually be developed, through effort and through learning.
So instead of saying like, oh, I'm just not good at math, it's more like, okay, I can get better at this if I'm willing to put in the time and the effort.
Right, and when you adopt that growth mindset, challenges, they become opportunities for growth instead of threats to your ego. And that can have a huge impact on how motivated you feel.
Because if you think that you can improve, you're more likely to keep trying right, even when things get tough.
Exactly. Okay, so here's another really interesting tactic you can try. Try to find ways to make even those mundane tasks more intrinsically rewarding.
Wait a minute, how do you do that? That sounds like some kind of like Jedi mind trick.
It's not magic, but it does involve a little bit of a perspective shift. Think about how you can connect that task, to your values, or even just look for those tiny bits of enjoyment within the process itself.
Okay, so let's say I absolutely hate doing laundry. How am I supposed to find any kind of intrinsic motivation in that?
Well, maybe you can try reframing it, as a way of taking care of your clothes so they last longer. Or maybe you can put on some of your favorite music or listen to a podcast while you're folding clothes, make it a little bit more enjoyable.
Those are actually really good ideas.
Yeah.
I can see how just kind of changing your perspective can really make a difference.
And then, of course, there's always positive reinforcement.
Ah, yes. Everybody loves a good pat on the back. But is that really that important for adults too? I mean, we're not training puppies here, are we?
It really is important. When we acknowledge our accomplishments and celebrate them, no matter how small it is, it can create this positive feedback loop that really fuels our motivation. It's kind of like giving ourselves, a little reward for doing a good job.
And it doesn't have to be anything big, right? It can be as simple as like saying, hey, I nailed that presentation. Good job, me.
Exactly. Sometimes those little internal celebrations can be even more powerful than any kind of external reward.
Man, I'm feeling motivated already. Realistic goals, growth mindset, finding the hidden rewards and celebrating wins. This is good stuff.
And there's one more thing that I think is really important to consider.
Wait, there's more. I'm like overflowing with motivation knowledge already. What else is there?
Think about the role of autonomy in motivation. Because when we feel like we have control over our choices and our actions, we tend to be a lot more motivated and engaged.
Oh, so like giving people the freedom to make their own decisions, even small ones that can boost motivation?
Yeah, that's the idea. It's all about fostering, that sense of ownership and control. And it doesn't matter if it's, in a work setting or in your personal life when you're pursuing your own goals.
Yeah, that makes sense. If I force myself to go to the gym just because someone else told me to, I'm probably not going to stick with it. But if I choose to go because I want to get healthier and I want to feel better, then I'm much more likely to stay motivated.
Absolutely. Autonomy is a big part of tapping into that intrinsic motivation that we were talking about before.
This has been so insightful.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm seeing motivation in a whole new light.
And we're just scratching the surface. There is so much more to discover about the psychology of motivation. But for now,
I think we've given our listeners a really solid place to start, to begin building their own motivational journeys.
I agree. The more we understand what drives us, the better equipped we are to achieve our goals and, live those fulfilling lives that we all want.
Well, folks, it looks like we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of motivation. And
we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From Maslow's hierarchy to the differences between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. And we even touched on that fascinating over-justification effect. And of course, all those practical strategies for boosting our motivation.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah.
But I think the big takeaway here is that motivation isn't just some fixed trait, right? It's something that we can actually influence and nurture.
And, just that knowledge alone, that we can influence our own motivation, that can be incredibly empowering. It can help us make better choices and find more fulfillment in all areas of our lives.
We really hope that you've picked up some valuable tools here today that you can use on your own journey towards greater motivation.
And remember, it's not about finding that one magic formula. It's about getting to know yourself, understanding your goals, and finding what works best for you.
So to wrap things up, we want to leave you with one last little challenge.
Think about a specific goal that you're working towards right now.
What's motivating you?
Is it more intrinsic motivation, extrinsic, or a little bit of both?
And are there any strategies that we've talked about today that you could use, to boost your motivation and increase your chances of reaching that goal?
Take some time to reflect on these questions and start putting that knowledge into action.
And remember, even those small steps, they can lead to huge progress over time.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into motivation.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the world of psychology and personal growth. Until next time. So we've come to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of motivation.
It's been a really interesting journey, hasn't it? Exploring, all the different facets of motivation.
Absolutely. And, the big takeaway for me is that motivation, it's not this fixed thing.
It's dynamic, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a process that we can actually shape and we can influence.
And just understanding that, can be really empowering for people.
Yeah, and hopefully our listeners have picked up some useful tools along the way that they can use on their own journeys towards greater motivation.
And, it's really all about, figuring out what works best for you as an individual.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all solution here.
Exactly. And I think, as we wrap up here, it would be great for everyone listening to just take a moment to think about, one specific goal that you're working towards right now.
Yeah, what's driving you? Is it more intrinsic or extrinsic motivation?
Or maybe it's a combination of both.
And, think about the strategies that we've talked about today. Are there any that you could use to kind of, boost your motivation and increase your chances of success?
So yeah, just take some time to reflect on all of this, and most importantly, start putting, this knowledge into action.
Because even those small steps, they can make a big difference over time.
Absolutely.
So that's it for this episode of the Learn English Lab.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into motivation.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into all sorts of fascinating topics. Until next time.